2013. First up is a review and approval of minutes. I have meeting minutes of December 10th. We've had some comments in. Can I have a motion for accepting the minutes of December 10th?
Make a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Eileen and Peter. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next up is, if you're all here for the public hearing, we have a session before that. It's called a public comment. And it's just for raising any issues that people have outside of the current Park Point project that we will have a public hearing on. Anybody wish to make any comments? Okay. We'll go up and get the sheet. Have a motion to open up the public hearing on the Wilmerite SUNY Park Point project.
So moved.
Thank you, Peter. There's a second.
Second.
Thank you, Eileen. All those in favor?
Aye.
A couple of ground rules up front before we start the public hearing. We're going to try to limit you to 5 minutes. And I'm not sitting with a watch, but please try to be as courteous to everybody else as you can in raising your points within that time frame. Secondly, this planning board does not make a decision on taxes, pilots, or anything else like that. In our review of the draft environmental impact statement, we review the fiscal impacts of a project. A pilot is a component of it. And there is also other components of a fiscal impact. For the draft environmental impact statement, we review in total a fiscal impact. When it comes to whether a entity gets a pilot or not, it falls under the jurisdiction of the IDA, the Industrial Development Agency, who will conduct their own public hearing at some day distance if the applicant makes an application to them for a pilot. Obviously, we have to evaluate both extremes as far as our fiscal impact, and we'll do that going forward on it. But this is just, we're really from our stage reviewing the draft environmental impact statement, which covers a lot of areas besides the pilot, water, sewage, traffic, impacts of that sort. We will, once we complete our review, once we get all the public input that we have, and for anybody who's not aware of it, we've had public hearings since the beginning of November on this project. And there are, I think we have quite a bit of transcript pages, but we have had a number of sessions already to discuss some of the issues that the public has brought up. We use that as input to go ahead and complete what we call the final environmental impact statement, which is an attempt to address those issues that have been raised by the public, by the planning board, by other agencies, and to address those things with a response one way or the other, whether we can mitigate it, whether it's a known issue. But that all goes into the final environmental impact statement. Because of the size of the project, the impact on the town, we'll probably have a public hearing on the final environmental impact statement. And go through a process to get public input on that. Have we gotten everything? Have we addressed it? What are the issues? Are there any outstanding that haven't been addressed? Any new issues that have been raised when we've been doing the analysis? So we will have another public hearing when we get to the final environmental impact statement. That will go forward into a finding statement on whether the project can go forward from an environmental point of view. The board also does a site review. Does it meet the requirements of our zoning code for site plan, and any conditions that are set forth on it. There is also a number of variances that the applicant has now before the zoning board of appeals, and that is a process that would have to be completed prior to us ever giving site plan approval. So, just to reemphasize, we're not coming to a decision on a pilot. We don't come to a decision on a pilot. That is later on in the process, and the public hearing and the IDA handles that. We're well aware of it because it's been brought up in all the public hearings that we've had, and it is a major topic and one that needs to be addressed in our final impact statement. So,
Mike, I just have one question about
Sure.
that, because I feel like George has spoken with the folks at the county IDA, and I have, and I feel like they do rely on the town, whether it's the town board or the planning board, to provide information as to the emergency services, et cetera, the financial impact that a project like this will have on our local municipality. So they are looking for our input or interpretation of how it will affect whether or not this pilot deserves and needs, or whether this project deserves and needs a pilot. Is that your take on it as well, George?
They do, in their process, evaluate the impact and whether the impact of the pilot is taking into account the cost to the town. So, essentially, yes. I mean,
that's our fiscal analysis.
But I think what's interesting is that the county IDA is not actually doing any financial analysis.
No.
They're just looking at our work locally.
Whether they are or not, we're doing the fiscal analysis. The input that the IDA would use is going to be coming from that kind of analysis that we're doing. So, you're right in saying that they'll look at the input, but one of the things that we have to do is what are the costs to the town? And how does it impact that? And that's
Right,
what
we
we
don't-
gotta address.
Right, we don't make the final decision, but the county IDA is relying on our town board and our planning board.
Yep.
So Mike, to that end, where are we with retaining someone to do the fiscal impact analysis?
I'm not, because over the holidays, we haven't really gotten together with the town board. And that was one of the issues that we were gonna address, this week, because we wanna get together with them in selecting, the analysis, put out the RFP for that, and, So,
Has
we're not-
anything gone out yet, though, or no?
no. But should be shortly. Okay, with that, I will, go through it. If it gets warm in here, if you like, take your coats off, there's a switch back there, we'll turn the fans on. That's the extent of our cooling, ability here. So, bear with us in what we have, and try to keep your, comments. We have someone transcribing, so there's going to be a transcription of your comments on it going forward. And those are all part of the record and all part of the review. So starting with the number one, Dave Rooney. There you are.
Well, I don't know if having given the parameters, I don't know if anything I'm about to say falls within them, but I'm on the sheet, so. My name is Dave Rooney. I live at 13 Morningstar in the town of New Paltz, and I've been a resident of New Paltz for almost 11 years. By way of disclosure, I'm also the Vice President for Student Affairs at SUNY New Paltz. And I've been reading an awful lot of statistics in letters to the editor, the New Paltz Times articles. So I want to put some on the record, just so we all know what we're working with. And I ran these today. It's my job to know these. There are 7,885 students head count at SUNY New Paltz. We currently have 2,860 beds on the campus. That means currently we house approximately 44% of the undergraduates at New Paltz, which totals 6,582, and we house 36% of the total number of students at SUNY New Paltz. If and when the 700 beds come into being, and they're completely filled with students, be they graduate or undergraduate, we will still house 45% of the total headcount population of SUNY New Paltz. Why do I tell you these statistics? Well, when I came here almost 11 years ago, one of the first meetings I had was with Jason during his first term. One of the topics of conversation was that SUNY New Paltz really needed to do more to house students on the campus because the density of the village was becoming overwhelming, particularly with student population. In 2001, we opened DeSopas Hall to accommodate that request because we believed that he was correct. In 2005, we opened Lenape Hall in an attempt to continue to diminish the concentration of students in the village and in the town. When Terry took office, he also made the same request and said that one of his primary objectives was to decrease the student density in the village of New Paltz. At that point in time, we had pretty much exhausted our ability to build new residence halls based on the debt service, and we began to look for other opportunities to increase student housing on or around the campus. I tell you all of this because Park Point, which was not a gelled idea at the time, was one of the options. There were a number of state universities that were looking at public-private partnerships, be they for student housing, there were retirement home options and other things like that. We did so with the blessing of Terry, and ultimately the Moriello land became available, and that was pretty much the history of this. We really believed at the time that we were trying to be a good neighbor to the village and town. We firmly believe as a residential campus, even with the capacity of the proposed Park Point, that we should do more than house 45% of the student population on what we consider a residential campus. We also believe that as good neighbors, student density should be on or around the campus and not dispersed within the community. We believe in neighborhoods. We believe that Terry and Jason both have the long-term best interests of the village in mind, and as good neighbors, we were trying to do that. I guess on a personal note, I feel like I'm trying to hit a moving target with these kinds of things. It was a huge undertaking to build Lenape Hall. We really didn't have the money to do it, but we had made a commitment to the village that we would decrease the density, and this is the next logical step. The state of New York is not affording us the opportunity to build anything right now, and they have not released any funds for new student housing for 2 years, and it looks like we're looking at a third year. This is what we have, and this is what we were trying to do, and we were trying to be the good neighbors that the village and the town want us to be, and we want to be to the village and town. I don't know about pilots, taxes and things. I pay the same New Paltz taxes that all of you do. I understand the concerns. My job as the Student Affairs VP is to serve the students, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Just another note, I will probably mispronounce at least half the names that are on the list, so bear with me. If it sounds like your name, let's try it that way. But I should be all right with David Porter.
Hi, I followed from a distance through the newspaper the hearings that have happened so far, and I really praise the community for being so.
Could you speak up, please?
I praise the,
Speak up, please.
I praise the community for being so intensely involved. And I'll go over here. In providing its input, I think it's really a great a great asset to the community to have so many people who are willing to turn out for things like this. I also urge that the record be kept open after the closing of the public hearing so that any additional developer studies or studies by other consultants that the planning board hires can be looked at by the public and commented upon, and those comments in turn can become part of the official record. Just three quick comments and then a little bit longer one. One is about traffic. I noticed that in the traffic analysis there was no Friday peak PM survey, and everybody in New Paltz knows that late afternoon and early evening on Friday is the densest traffic of the week, and clearly that would be all the more augmented by students who are coming in, supposedly presently commuting students who might be quite interested in going back home for the weekend. So I think that's a really important one to get done by the traffic consultant so that you can have a full rounded picture of what the traffic impact is going to be and whether there need to be mitigations. Secondly, concerning wetlands, the town, as many of you know, has spent many years putting together what I consider an excellent wetlands town ordinance. And while that is presently not in effect because it's been challenged in the courts, I do think that it's the product of many hearings, much detailed expert analysis, and I fully expect the challenge to be overturned at the appeals level. But nevertheless, I think the standards that are presented in the wetlands law before the court challenge, that those ought to be upheld and applied to this particular project as guidelines. And third, about toxic soils. I know you've discussed that some in the past. I just point out that the DEIS map really does not show that there's going to be mitigation of the entire area of construction, let alone a 100-foot buffer away from the buildings and the improvements that are going on, and I think that needs to be clarified. And furthermore, I think the monitoring of mitigation is not adequate. It's wholly dependent on the developer simply certifying that such and such measures have been taken at the end of the process. There should be periodic inspections by an independent authority. If the town inspector is unable to do that because of other priorities, and New Paltz is not very good for these kinds of inspections, I suggest that the planning board assure that there will be an independent inspector who goes out periodically to look at the mitigation measures to make sure that the toxic soil is not spread in the atmosphere, is not leaking elsewhere, that the measures that they call for in the DEIS are in fact taken. Finally, about the economic and fiscal impact, I think there is still some questionable assumptions there. The college is saying that to keep the college enrollment at the present level, it must have these new nearby housing units, as we just heard, that there's an overwhelming demand by existing commuter students for such housing, although I didn't find any place there where they list the price of what the units would be and whether the demand would in fact be there if the price is too strong for them to bear. They say that 90% of the students, the student tenants will come from outside of New Paltz, thus there will be no new vacancies created in the town apartments. I think this is all very fuzzy. I don't think that it's something that's more than a subjective assumption, and there needs to be some additional data about that through surveys. I don't know. I mean, maybe the college has done surveys, but they weren't provided in the DEIS. And I don't know why people who are in town apartments right now, students who are in town apartments now, would not also be able to come into these units, and therefore there wouldn't be that many more commuter students coming in. I mean, the whole thing is a very gray area, and I think it really should be made much more specific. Certainly one of the possibilities is that if there's a lot of vacancy in the town apartments that are now being lived in by students, that they might empty and force the landlords to convert these to family dwellings, which then would have definitely an impact on the school system, which is not accounted for at all in the DEIS. So I think that really needs to be looked at. And the whole question of non-students, will they be eligible or not to get into this housing? I haven't heard of any clarification of that. But obviously that's a very important issue. I saw that 50% of the construction jobs were promised from within the town, but I didn't see any evidence that for that assumption. And that makes a big difference in terms of how much income is going to be spent by construction workers as a result of this project. I saw that they indicated an average of $40,000 for 10 new jobs that will be involved in the operation and maintenance of the new development, but there needs to be a job breakdown and assurance of living wages for everybody who's going to be involved in that. And I find it hard to believe that it's going to be a $40,000 salary for everybody involved in operation and maintenance. So those on the lower end really need to be assured of a living wage, and that's up to the developer to assure that. And then concerning the pilot eligibility, I won't go into that again, as Mike was clarifying in detail. That's not something that you're going to be deciding, but I don't know, has there been any definite legal conclusion that this project is eligible for a pilot? I've seen the contrary assertions in the DEIS. The developer says this is going to be tax exempt because it's a SUNY foundation, but other people have said, no, it's the private developer who's doing this and they should pay full taxes. If it is the private developer, absolutely, I think they should not be getting a pilot arrangement. It's just the same kind of situation as happened with the Walmart struggle in the mid-90s, when the developer came in and wanted to get a big pilot exemption, and the Chamber of Commerce, to their credit, said, no, this is totally unfair to the existing businesses in here, which are already going to be challenged by the new development. And why should this residential developer get this huge tax break? So that legal question has to be answered, but then also, I think if in fact they are subject to taxes, that they should not receive a pilot. All in all, I think it would make sense for the planning board to ask the developer to set up an escrow account so that you could hire an independent analyst, a truly independent analyst, to look at the facts and figures about the fiscal impact, the economic impact, because so much of this stuff is just dependent in the DEIS on assumptions, on allegations that are made by the developer. And most of us are not that familiar with these kinds of developments. I'm more familiar with the retail side because I've commented on a number of these, but not so much on the student enrollment and so on. And I think we need to have somebody who's able to do that from an independent perspective to feed into the information base for the planning board.
Thank you, David. Mike? Francisi? Yep.
I had a little hard time hearing you before. You make no decisions whatsoever or don't put anything in your report about the pilot program?
We will do a fiscal impact. One of the things that Tim alluded to there is we have to do the analysis of what kind of costs this type of project will have on the
Right.
town of New Paltz.
Okay.
And for that, we have to do an analysis of it. What Ben was saying, part of that cost, that information would go to the IDA in their recognition of it. But
Okay.
it's up to us, and David brought out the same point, we have to do a real good job of what the costs are going to be to the town for the services that the town will have required to provide for this.
The thing that is kind of strange, being a New Paltz resident, I'm a New Paltz town resident, Highland School postal resident, in between both, okay? We don't know what's going on, and I suggest that everybody that is watching this, get the New Paltz Times. It's not the greatest paper in the world, but you will find out what's going on, and no one knows what's going on. I don't get a letter, I don't get any information about this, okay? As far as fiscal impact, I'll try to stick to that. One thing that I found out that happened after a long time of having my taxes raised, tripled in 3 years, tripled, from 2,600 to over 8,000. That in Highland, they Lowe's was put up, And after everyone decided on it, they said, okay, I'm gonna put up Lowe's. Okay. The story I get is that after that, they got a whole bunch of lawyers in suits, and they got onto this type of pilot program or super tax reduction for 7 years. Okay, so they built it, everyone decided it was a good idea. Then they sent their lawyers in, and then they got this huge break. Not even, you know, right? And what happened was, like this year, my son's supposed to go to kindergarten. They were gonna stop kindergarten. They said it's not in the, it's not mandatory in the state of New York, and we don't have the money to pay for it. The governor put a 2.2 tax cap, and we had to raise it to 6 points, or there was gonna be no kindergarten. So we raised it, we wound up paying for it. I don't think that, you know, billion-dollar corporations I should pay their bills. And I'm sorry, I disagree with the gentleman over here that they're good neighbors. A good neighbor, you really should know about the pilot program. It's destroying lives here. People are getting their houses foreclosed on. There aren't many jobs here. And also, kids that don't pay taxes in the state property get the vote. So that to me is not being a really good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Miller. I thought that was up, I didn't think, Ben? Yeah. I thought it was, but the B didn't look like it was.
Stand over there so you don't have to switch the camera back and forth. I brought written copies of what I have to say so you guys can read it later to your heart's content.
I was just scan the highlights on it, it becomes part of the record, written comments like that.
Okay. Just in case I forget to say something. Got the comments? First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for the work that you guys are doing on this. I know it's a lot of work, and it's not easy work, and you're between a rock and a hard place with everybody upset for various reasons. So I appreciate that. Everybody here seems to take this seriously, and that to me is the most important part of this process, so I'm happy to be a part of it. I have a couple of points that I wanted to make regarding the Park Point proposal, and then some follow-up questions regarding these points. The gentleman that spoke before, I don't know where he is, the gentleman on the end, he actually covered a fair bit of what I was going to say, so I'll try to go quickly over some of that information, but I do think it's important that multiple people raise these questions to you so that you understand how much of a concern it is. The overall goal that I have in speaking to you today, which I think has been stated already and will be stated again by others, is it's wonderful that this project is being proposed and that the college is trying to be a good neighbor and that these services are, you know, housing is always going to be necessary in New Paltz for students as well as everybody else. However, it's important that the information that you guys get and the information that you obtain on your own is not all coming from the same source. If all your information comes from the same source, then it's very difficult for you to determine how accurate it is, especially if that source is financially motivated to give you certain information or information in a certain way. I'm sure you understand. So the two goals that I have in speaking to you are this very quickly. I hope that you will be reviewing and studying all this information, all these questions independently, separate from what Wilmerite has already provided in their DEIS statement. And I hope that you will continue to keep the public comment open during the process as well as at the end of the process, because this by no means is all I have to say on this subject. And I'm sure a lot of people here who have a 5-minute restriction are going to feel the same way, that they won't be able to say everything that they'd like to say today. I do think that you should keep the public comment open, and I hope that you will consider that as I provide this information. So I'm going to refer to 3 different parts of the DEIS, all in Appendix H, which is the economic and fiscal impact analysis, which I'll be honest is the part that I went through with a fine-tooth comb as opposed to the other parts. It's a little more my area of expertise. So the vacancy rate for New Paltz, and some of this information, I apologize in advance, was given to the town board, but I don't know how well this has been communicated, so I'm going to repeat some of this today. Wilmerite reported in the economic and fiscal impact analysis that the vacancy rate for New Paltz was listed as 0.3%. That came from a 2010 study done by Ulster County. The federal government also did a 2010 study, the U.S. Census. Their study is a little bit better funded, a little more thorough. they got 7.3%. Very significant difference between 0.3, 7.3. This just illustrates the need for you guys to independently review this information and study it yourselves. There's also, since that was done, both of those studies were done in 2010, there's been a significant number of units built in New Paltz for residential housing since that time. So the vacancy rate has changed, whatever it was at that time. So my questions regarding that point are, what is New Paltz's current vacancy rate? I do not know the answer to this. How has it changed in the past several years? How does it compare with similar college towns? What is a healthy vacancy rate considered to be? I don't know the answer to that either. Especially considering that we have a very large rental community here, that seems to be a very pertinent question for this project. How much will the vacancy rate change if this project is built? What are the likely fiscal and community impacts from such a change? I'm sure you guys are going to be researching this. And how would these impacts be mitigated if the project were either built in smaller stages than the two-stage endeavor that's being proposed, or in a smaller capacity than what's currently being proposed? That was my first question, my first concern. The second part talks about drawing new students into the town, again in Appendix H, and this point was already made, but I'm going to make it again. The phrase net new student is a really tough phrase to prove in any real substantial way. They're trying to say that 90% are going to be net new students into this housing complex. There is no detailed data at all in the appendix to support this or deny this in any way. The facts are there are currently many students that already live off campus, and the college is saying that they're not planning on increasing enrollment. Those things lead me to believe that this will not be as significantly net student as they think it will. So the questions are, if enrollment doesn't increase, off-campus housing is already in existence, how likely is it that most of the students that would live in Park Point already live in off-campus housing, or would have lived there if Park Point was not built, thereby eliminating them as net new students? How long does SUNY New Paltz intend to not increase enrollment, and what are their motivations for doing so? The third part, again, Appendix H, speaking about economic impact. The language is a little hard to understand in this phrase, but I'm going to repeat it to you. This is word for word how it appears in the paragraph. The impact, referring to economic, is broken down by jobs, wages, and sales generated in the town by the new spending of the net new residents, and also as a result of that spending recirculating throughout the economy as local businesses make additional purchases and employees spend their wages locally. I study numbers a lot. That's really hard for me to even get an idea of how they started to study that and come up with an actual number. So my questions are, how can Wilmerite estimate what local businesses will purchase? Given the supposition that I made in point 2 that these are not net new students, how would that change the data on both local purchases and local spending? What about students that currently commute and then decide to move into Park Point? They were most likely already spending some of their money in the local community. How does this factor change? Because they're counting them as net new students. I appreciate all your help. I'm sure you guys are going to do the best due diligence that you can to make sure that this project is useful. Please understand that as a voice, we the public are most useful if we are properly informed, and because all the data is not yet collected on this, I feel that we should still continue to be informed and continue to have a voice. And I'll make one last comment. I don't know how many college students are here today, but you mentioned that this has been going on since November. November through January, that's a very limited time to get student input, and I did hear at the town meetings already some really good input from the students. I feel like to cut off public comment at this time would be to deprive them of a useful voice, because they're not here. And when they were here, they were going through finals and other stuff like that, so it might have been a little more challenging. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ben.
Leave these copies. Oh, you want me to leave them?
Give them to Kelly.
I'll give them to Kelly.
There you go. Otherwise, I'll get lost on the table here.
No problem.
Thanks. John Johnson.
Hello, my name's John Johnson. I'm a resident of the town of New Paltz, and I own some rental properties throughout the village.
Ask the speaker to speak up, please.
Yes. And anyway, the gentleman from the college earlier stated that they would like to be good neighbors, and I believe that to be true. And I came to this town 20 years ago and invested in a broken down shack that I spent a year fixing up, saving my nickels, saving my dimes. A lot of you may know the place. It's the old Mexican restaurant on North Chestnut Street that was condemned for somewhere around 10 years, boarded up, overgrown, side of the building rotted out. Anyway, I worked hard. I invested in this community. I moved to this community. I live here. I spend my money here. And now this board has to figure out, are they going to let Wilmerite, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, come into this community? And you know, if it was a tenth of the size, a quarter of the size, I would say, you know what, they have every right to come. And I do feel they have every right to come. But the problem is, while myself and other people, all the people that have come before this board looking for accessory apartments and went through the expense of building them, it's not just the landlords, it's owner-occupied people that rely on that, call it 400, 500, whatever it is a month, in order to pay their bills. And because the college wasn't proactive in providing the housing, this community provided the housing. And so right now, we're all depending on this income to keep this community moving. Now, I read through the EIS study, and there was a ton of financial information that just wasn't there. A lot of what the gentleman from the college mentioned, all of that should be in there. He states, and I couldn't do the math. I've grown accustomed to using a calculator. If you only house 44% of the student population currently, well, there's 56% of the population that's living throughout the village, minus the commuters. The reason they're commuting from Orange County and from Dutchess County and from here, there, and everywhere is because they don't have the money to come here and pay rent. One of my tenants last year, her mother said, yeah, she's not coming back this year because we can't afford it. She's going to commute from Orange County. So you build 732 bedrooms. She's not coming here. What's going to happen, and on page 67 of the EIS, there's some verbiage that says that we're going to transfer the people from the north side of the campus to the south side of the campus. Well, the north side of the campus is the village. So if we're going to take 56% of the 8,000 students that live throughout this community, and we're going to add 732 bedrooms, which comes out to somewhere between 15–18%, that means we are going to have a vacancy rate in this community of 15–18%. Now, some of these places will be, as Dave said, will be sucked up by families, putting kids into schools, burdening our schools. I'm not even going to mention the pilot. But what it's also going to do is it's gonna take the people with accessory apartments in the town of New Paltz, west of the Wallkill, north of here, east of here, and those people that are living there, they're gonna say, okay, we're gonna move to the village. So now, it's gonna be a big shell game, but when we're all done, what's gonna happen? We're gonna have 732 vacancies. It's just common sense. I request that the board leave the public hearing open based on the fact that there's a lot of people that have no idea that this is what's going on. People from Gardner, they're affected. They pay school taxes. There was one other point I wanted to make. I should have written it down.
What are alternative ways to get renters? So you mentioned
It's all right. Let him,
I request that you leave the public hearing open, and I request that you hire an independent economist to come and do an extensive study of the fiscal impact, because as vacancies increase, the quality of the community decreases. And as the community quality decreases, traffic goes up, buildings fall into disarray, everyone's home values will decrease in an already suppressed market. Thank you for listening.
thank you, John. Glenn?
Me?
You all right? No, not you. Nothing personal, Glenn.
Oh, Glenn.
I can't read.
Dimitrovic?
Yes, that's what I think it is.
Where'd he go?
Okay, we'll save him.
You gonna talk one? No? Okay.
Okay. Sal Rondelli,
Here.
right there. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a resident of Gardner, and I'm also an investor here in New Paltz, doing housing.
Can you speak up a little, please?
And I'm very concerned, there's a lot of confusion about the fiscal impact to the town and village and the outer part of the.
Would you please speak up a little?
Sure, sorry about that.
Microphones.
I agree with everyone so far from the college, saying that they have needs for the students, to the people like Ben and Sam, John Johnson, who I think are around the point that there's a lot of confusion on what is the fiscal impact going to be on businesses, the residents of New Paltz, and contributors to the tax payments to the school system. And I think that the board should really keep it open until there is an independent commission, an independent economist, an independent CPA that can really give us an idea of what is our cost going to be once this construction is going to be in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Do the rest of the family want to? No. No? Sometimes we say. Okay. Michael Smith. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, right here. I'm Michael Smith, 257 Main Street, Chamber of Commerce in New Paltz. I live in New Windsor, and just at these public hearings, with the fiscal impact, I would just hope that you also look not only on the costs, but also on the income side to do a very thorough investigation on that as well. And also to provide some information as to the amount of people over the years or projected who have been discouraged to come to this village and to the town and the impact of that by having the shortfall of student housing and faculty housing of about, just under 60%. I think those two, combined with all the costs that are involved, you have the balance side with the income to do a very thorough work on that, and with the potential of new people coming into the area as well would be very helpful. That's it.
Thank you, Michael. Jonathan?
Well, good to be
He's
on a
gonna-
different kind of,
Make sure he wants to see you.
Jonathan Wright.
Okay.
I have an interesting perspective on this. I was on the planning board when this was proposed. I sat with you guys for, except for, I don't know, the two new members of the board,
So
but,
can I ask you,
for,
when you're facing that way?
yeah. So I'll try to speak up, but I am going to direct my comments to the board. I always felt like that was the best approach. It is public comment, but it's public comment to you about the DEIS. And I have the unique perspective of having been on this board for 8 years and spending the first 2 years of the formal review of this, having reviewed it with you. I spent another year before that having experienced and watching as the campus and Wilmerite positioned this project to first the village, with the potential either of annexing into the village or at least getting village water, and they had proposed doing a extensive survey of the existing sewer capacity and what that would mean for this size of the project. Would there be capacity? Would they be able to expand capacity? Can they tap into it? And that was a whole year before we actually had a formal application here. So 3 years of reviewing this project, and the last year of your review of the project, I was no longer on the board. So now I sit here on the other side of the table. I'm coming to you for the first time under a different role. I live in the village, but also obviously the village is the town. This is an interesting project because it's a property that abuts the village and town, and there has been discussion of potentially annexing it, making it part of the village, or does it go into the review of the town planning board or the village planning board? I've always, and I've been saying this over a series of years of being involved in local planning and development. I sat on the Transportation Land Use Committee, the Implementation Committee. I was part of the review and ultimately watching the recommendations come out of the Transportation, the 5-year Transportation Land Use Study. The entire first 3 years of my review of this project, I kept reiterating the fact that they really should look at as a key component to the DEIS and the secret process, the Transportation Land Use Study, because it predates the proposal, and it laid out short-term, medium-term, and long-term planning and transportation, land use planning and transportation goals for this community. I don't see that in this DEIS. I don't see an extensive look in the way that the town and the village have been reviewing their comprehensive plans. Both comprehensive plans are out of date. But even this project, when I first saw it, the early stages of it, it didn't adhere to the 1960s and the 1990 comprehensive plans that we had in the past. It doesn't really aggressively focus on this idea of building walkable, sustainable communities that both were iterated in the 60s in the comprehensive planning process, which I've read and many of you have also looked at, and in the 90s and some of the subsequent work. And I know personally some of the issues that I have addressed in our review of it for the first 2 years are not reflected in this DEIS or any of the alternatives that have been proposed. Just so that, I guess, to put it into context, this is one of the key corridors that the Transportation and Land Use Study recommends. There's 8 different locations where the recommendations of, they did an analysis of about 30-year build-out of New Paltz and what would happen over the course of 30 years, and it was sprawl. It was more cul-de-sacs, more destruction of woodlands and wetlands, and sprawl from the village into the town. The recommendations that came out of that were to stop this sprawl, because we now know the extreme cases and the detriment that sprawl is creating in our communities, but to mitigate this, the potential impacts of the sprawl, to concentrate the growth and plan the growth for these 8 corridors, 4 of which are 4 of the major gateway parts to the plan. This is a key component of that. And that whole corridor from South Putt to through 32 and ultimately to 208 and South Chestnut were evaluated as a significant part of that 30-year growth in New Paltz. So when this proposal was first presented to us and they were talking about 600 to 700 units, I immediately did the math. If you think this is the village, which it is, it's almost like an annex to the village, because it's really, there's no other real development out there except for that one old factory, or that one old orchard warehouse that was converted into an apartment. But there's no more residential if you go out in that area. But that whole area is slated for that. And Dave, we talked about this. I over a period of time, talked about this road that was defined. We've always talked about one of the big problems with traffic in this community is the lack of another artery going from west to east and east to west. And there was a road that was, paper road that was developed, and everybody should look at this. It's not included in the DEIs. It's not included in their plan at all. When we are given this charge of looking at a project, one of the big components that the county and just proper land use planning requires is that we look at connectivity. And there was a road that was supposed to go from, it was a paper road, but from South Putt, 232, and ultimately to 208. And it has never, and they were, and I suggested that they accommodate that, because if they build in this property, we lose that corridor. If they don't build that gateway, that connection from South Putt all the way to 208, and they build the project as it's presented right now, we lose that ability to have that connectivity, and that is lost forever. There's a few things that we lose forever that I don't think are assessed in the DEIS. I think they overestimate how bad the farmland is. There's about 20% of this that actually is good soils based on your soil maps. And they keep, in every assessment of we're taking agricultural lands and we're developing it. Irrevocable. We will never be able to bring those back if this development is built as proposed. We will never be able to bring those agricultural lands back. But if you look at the DIS, they're constantly negating the value of these agricultural lands and not truly assessing the potential economic loss of taking these agricultural lands out of agricultural use, and also simply the need for this. I don't believe that this land should not be built. I think it should be assessed in a comprehensive way. And what has not been done with this is any comprehensive assessment of how this is potentially affecting future growth, or could be developed out in this corridor and making this one of the key gateways to the community. So I'm not either for this approach or against this approach, but I do know the plan that was proposed what I saw 3 years ago and what was ultimately formally proposed a couple years ago here has not changed significantly, and none of the alternatives that are required under the SEQR process truly looked at real alternatives. We talked about in our review of this about bringing the development up to the road and densifying that corridor and making it more walkable and bikeable. But when you look at the parking places that are required for this, it's clearly not. It's clearly intended to have these residents driving cars to there. It's not creating a more walkable, bikeable, and mass transit oriented community as this 1960 comprehensive plan and the 1990s comprehensive plan both call for. I feel like let me go to some more specifics, and I will give you a more formal. I've read through it once completely. I've looked at most of the maps, and I do have some comments that I'll read to you, but I'll also provide a more substantive written response. But
got a couple of minutes,
okay.
Jonathan, okay?
So I think the assessment of the buildable acreage is very important. I think that needs to be assessed. They assess it as 39 buildable acres. There's 50 acres there, of which 17 of the acres are woodlands and wetlands. Woodlands, 10% of it's wetlands. And if there's 50 acres and they're saying 39% are buildable, I've reviewed that property with a few of you on tours we've taken. There's steep slopes there. I really believe that the assessment of 39 buildable acres really should be looked at. I don't believe it is truly 39 buildable acres on that property. That should be assessed. On page 14 of the benefits, they say minimal for fire and police. I think you really need to look at that, because if you look at the fire calls that are coming for the village fire department, a lion's share of those are coming from campus. The uses that are gonna be at this property are gonna be very similar to the uses that are on campus. Many of these new facilities are gonna have the same kind of rate of police and fire calls that the campus has, and I think they just brush over that, and they say that it's actually a benefit that they'll have minimal fire and police. But we already know that the campus has an inordinate amount of the fire calls and the burden of the village fire department. So I think you should definitely look at page 14 in that. Also in the benefits, it says the use of the existing village system that is already close to capacity. I think that needs to be assessed. I don't think that's a benefit that they're gonna have to tap in and use the village unless they do substantial upgrades to the village system. Page 37, the scenic view balloon test. I think they're absolutely misrepresenting this as not a key scenic view. You will take this out of that view shed and that view back to the west of the ridge. When you look at the DIS and those pages that show the perspective from looking back west, that view shed is lost forever. That drive into New Paltz and the ability to from that corridor there to see the view shed is lost, and they don't account for that. The community character, page 41, I would suggest you look at that. It drastically changes the community character, and it's not I don't think adhering to it. Not that it shouldn't be built, but it needs to be looked at with a real assessment of what it does to the community character. And again, they just brush over that. These are all seeker stuff that I think you guys need to drill down even more intensely. I've got a few more that I'm just gonna talk quickly. I think the contradictions of the alternatives, I do not think they really gave a true assessment of a viable, green, sustainable alternative. 47, that's the farm. Page 47, the farm, the scenic view shed and the farmland. I think that's an area. And page 50, review that a little bit more. I don't think they're adequately assessing the detriment.
All right, Jonathan, I got to cut you off and let the other speakers go. Please submit the written comments.
I just want to complete my comments by saying I think this project is very short-sighted. I think it is a retread of things that we've experienced in the 80s and 90s. It's not visionary. It's not bringing green technologies and the cutting-edge standards of building and development that we know are available and now are required. In the 80s and 90s, we didn't have as much information as we have today. We now know we have to build sustainable, and this project comes nowhere near adhering to a sustainable model. And I think you really should not move forward until specifically the financial issues are dealt with. But till this has a real proper review process, I would not send this to final. I would keep the public hearing open. I think that it is incomplete in my assessment. I don't believe that this is complete for this level of assessment.
All right, Jonathan. No, that's it. I gotta cut you off now. I've given you twice as much time as everybody else, and it's unfair to everybody else that's on the list to speak.
Okay,
I will submit your written comments.
I do hope to come back and speak.
Thank you. I did notice, and it's a benefit, but we have added a new clock to the town hall, one that I can see now without breaking my neck. So be aware that I can now see what 5 minutes are. So bear that in mind. I hate to put the next guy on the spot like that, but Tom Kastner?
Yeah, I don't mind being put on the spot.
Okay.
I'm hoping to get done before the end gets to the one up there. Yeah, my name's Tom Kastner. I'm a longtime resident of the town of New Paltz. I live on Mill Rock Road, and I have been on and off and on again a landlord in New Paltz probably for going on better than 25 years. I am not currently, but soon enough we will be landlords again. I'm here inspired by, first I want to say that I support this project categorically. Whatever questions there are, whatever questions that may have validity, I think can be answered by you folks. I think that you guys are going to do your jobs. I'm not here to tell you how to do it, but I have to trust that you will do your jobs properly and rationally, okay? I came here and I wanted to comment, if I may, having read this so-called Park Point petition in the local paper. I am a New Paltz taxpayer, but I am not one of the New Paltz taxpayers. That had something to do with this, what I feel is somewhat erroneous document in the local paper. I will not talk about the pilot, except to say that New Paltz has a history over the many years that I've been here. I've been in New Paltz almost 50 years. New Paltz does have a history of pilot programs with other business organizations, and they've done well or not well, depending, I suppose, on one's perspective. You know, that should, I don't think, be a critical issue here. One wants to think about, in my opinion, the greater good, and the greater good is, you know, assisting the college to do better for its students. As a graduate of SUNY, I am self-interested in that. I'm very happy that my degree, which I got back in the early 70s, has more validity today, given the academic credentials that the college has shown its increase in. Getting there. There is in this a comment about linking somehow the Wilmerite project to the negative results of the mortgage bubble early in the aughts. And I find that irrational, quite frankly. We can talk about that one-on-one at another point. I won't belabor that here. But I hope that you understand that as a person who's been a landlord and will be a landlord again, I don't feel that this is any threat at all to my ability to have income coming in from tenants, okay? New Paltz is always going to have, has always had in the past, more need for residences than it as a village, as a town, and as a college is going to be able to provide. And I throw on your desk, so to speak, comments or conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks. We go with rental agents here in New Paltz who tell me over and over again that they are full up in the various complexes that they represent, and that there are waiting lists out to, you know, God knows how far. So there is a need for residency in this community, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Almost did it.
Yeah, I appreciate you trying. Maureen Walker.
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Thank you.
Well, most of what I was thinking about has been addressed, and I do want to express an appreciation of the quality of the input that's happening. And I'm not as qualified as many here because I have not read the environmental impact statement. I've lived in this town for 30 years or so, so I have a connection with it that way. I've been a practicing real estate broker for about 15 of those years, not any longer, I'm retired. And my husband was a professor at the college from 1968 until he died in a college classroom virtually in 2004. So I'm connected with this in many ways. I'm also a landlord, and I'm also a resident who has been annoyed by student tenants. So I feel I come at this from many, many different angles. The chief property that I have with tenants in it is the house next door to me. And I acquired that for an investment purpose, but I was also very glad that it was the house next door to me, because I can pretty much guarantee if you drove past it, or even you know, knocked on the door, you probably wouldn't even recognize that it has students in it. So my chief point is one that I know must have been made many times with my first meeting here. I actually pay over $11,000 a year on that particular property. It's just a simple single-family house in a zoned correctly and fully inspected by the village and everything. I try to keep it as very high quality, and I keep a firm hand on the occupants as consistently as I can with giving them adult freedoms. So I am most concerned about the idea of the pilot, and I just hope that a really thorough investigation is made of the fiscal impact of this project, recognizing that the landlords of the village are one of the village businesses, which parallels it with the arguments that were made when Walmart wanted to come in and so on. Large corporations coming in make impacts on local businesses, and the residential property rental is a local business. It just seems very odd to me that my $11,000 per annum in taxes, which is like $1,000 a month virtually that I have to add to the rent, is going to be something that this large corporation might not have to pay and would therefore not have it added to their rents and would turn them into, I believe, unfair competitors with people who are in my business and try to do it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Beth?
I think I'm gonna pass because I'm gonna wait to talk about that pilot for the appropriate forum, because it sounds like it's something that we have to take up with Ulster County. I
Right.
looked on their website, and part of their application and their matrix of points to apply for this pilot, it's a lot of it's community support, and there's a lot of things that have to do with job creation. And it sounds like something I would have to go to the IDA and talk about, so I'll wait.
Okay, just hold on to the thoughts though. I
All
agree
right.
with you. Leonard, now it's your turn.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Loza. I live in the village. I guess the first thing, it's not on my list here, that I'd like to address to the VP from the college comes back to something that happened a while ago when there's a transformer explosion. There were either 3 or 4 firemen's uniforms that were destroyed. We asked the college for money to replace them. They said no. We're going to have to buy another large ladder truck. This one's going to expire in time. I'm hoping that the college would love to make a donation in some sort as a good neighbor policy to help us through that. I will say though that the college does give us fuel for our fire equipment though. That is part of a deal of an arrangement we have with them. But now on to the topics at hand. I have a letter here addressed to the town planning board and asked them to please address these issues in either the DEIS or the FEIS. Who will provide police protection, ambulance, fire, and any additional emergency sources? If granted this exemption, will these expenses be a burden on the New Paltz taxpayers or provided by the university services? This is a private housing project being built, owned by and run by and directly profiting the Wilmer-Wright Company, while appearing to function as a SUNY dormitory. Item number 2, will a portion of the housing project being designated as faculty housing be restricted to adults only? Or will faculty members with families, including children, be allowed to reside in the housing? If children are allowed to live there with faculty members, how will the expenses they create for the New Paltz school system be paid for in this case of possible tax exemption? What emergency contingency plans have been made to accommodate the sewage generated in the event of a sewage treatment plant failure? Do the sewage plants include holding tanks that can be pumped to transport or disposal sewage in this situation? Will this sewage ultimately end up being tied into our village sewage system? The last thing, how much money is presently in escrow to cover the costs for the planning board attorney, town engineer, town planner, and our town secretary? Are these expenses being paid by monthly billing or a debit system? We've been here for a long time, the attorneys, the engineers, and all of that, and I'm hoping that it's not coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Dave?
Dave Cackmo, 27 Grove Street. I'm not gonna stand up because it hurts a lot. I've been here for 44 years. I'm retired. And I'm gonna speak about the people that are on fixed incomes such as myself, and the taxes keep going up. I'm completely surrounded by student housing, which I wasn't up until a few years ago. And sometimes it's okay, but most of the time it's not, and I have to take things into my own hands. I would like to know how they are going to make the rentals on this housing cheap enough so that it's going to pull students from my area and other areas. Or is the cost going to be about the same as what the students are paying anyway? So the only advantage might be to be closer to the college, although I'm only a block and a half away from the college. I think that these people who are making a lot of money on this, will make a lot of money on this thing, do not have the right to be tax exempt and ask the taxpayers of New Paltz to pay for it. You know, the rich get richer and the rest of us, well, we don't get anything. And that's about all I've got to say.
Thank you, Dave. Claude, Charlie, I got anything? Forrest. There you are.
I'm going to pass over because I want to speak to the issue of the pilot and the negative impact that will have.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Steve Castillo. I'm a New Paltz resident. Last week in the New Paltz Time, it's been alluded to by some people already, a full-page ad announcing a petition related to the Park Point project was published. I will let you know that I have a copy or copies of that petition here. It's available for signatures. And also, if anyone wants to be involved further, they can contact the group, New Paltz taxpayers, at Park Point Petition@gmail.com. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Let me go up and see if there's any new names on the list.
Bob? Bob Gabrielli, I live in New Paltz, and have all my life. I'm not gonna tell you how long that is, but then you'll know my name, my age. Mike, I give you a blanket apology for anything I say that might be blunt, but it's the only way I know to get there fast. Mr. Chairman, I disagree wholeheartedly with your statement that the pilot is not a subject for this board and the DEIS. It is. It impacts fiscal responsibility, the fiscal impact of this project. You have a duty and a responsibility to mitigate any detrimental aspect, and I do believe that the tax issue of the pilot is the most significant issue we have. And you can mitigate those concerns through staging the project, through a myriad of them. You know, Seeker says that the planning board prepares or causes to be prepared all the studies. It doesn't say you accept the applicant's studies wholeheartedly, even if they're erroneous. Paul Brown, the former chairman of your planning board, has brought issue with the veracity and credibility of those reports, and I do too. I think that this board owes it to the community to start over again, hold your process open, and demand that the applicant fund an escrow account and that you guys hire your own experts directly and disregard any projects that have been given to you. I'm looking at the delineation of waters of the United States, including freshwater wetlands, and this is one of the things prepared for this DEIS, and nowhere does it say town of New Paltz. It says it was prepared for the college, the applicant, and the builder. And that's wrong. That's wrong. It should be, every study should be dedicated to you and have no other allegiance. I have a friend who had a 3-lot subdivision. He brought it before your attention. It took him from August to June. It was 10 months in a running. He had to put up $6,000. He had no net increase or loss of land, and they were big lots. And he put up that money, and you guys used it for engineering, and you used it for legal. So if one man just wants to have, he has 3 lots and he had them configured one way and he wanted to change it, we held him up for 10 months and took his money, and you guys hired those experts. He didn't come in and deliver the notations to you. You wouldn't have accepted that, and you shouldn't accept it in this category, in this instance. You should get your own reports. Issues here in Seeker concern growth and character of neighborhoods. That's significant. They also ask for economic influence. They also talk about roads. Another reason why you should keep this hearing open. There's 500 pages. I don't have time to read 500 pages. God bless you if you could read it. You're better and faster reader than I am. And I went to SUNY New Paltz, so I didn't read that much. they had smart notes when I went there. So, but in this community, we've been talking about an east-west bypass for how long? We've spent $500,000 for a study, and this applicant comes up and says the road will not be a bypass. And we're going to chew that and say it tastes good. It doesn't taste good. So I hope that this board will look at the road and the bypass and see it as a chance to mitigate something. Not only will you ameliorate a detriment to the community, but provide for a bonus for the community. Secondly, I want to talk for one quick second about the things you've got. There's 2 things going on. There's also the college. The college has a website, and they said on their website why it's okay. It won't hurt the community that much. Why the SUNY police will be answering calls. It says here, SUNY New Paltz police will be the first responders to emergency situations or park points. There will also be on. So we don't have to worry about that. Well, we're in the midst of a problem here where the SUNY police have a labor management issue where they won't take any calls off the campus, except in dire emergencies. Today, Chief Schneider had a meeting with the Supervisor Zimmet, about this concern. You can't say, how do we get here to this conclusion? Private property is going to say, I'm going to pick what law enforcement has jurisdiction. That doesn't work that way. It's in the township. The town has jurisdiction. SUNY has none. Thank you. But they just put it in there, and we're going to chew it and say it tastes real good. They talk about a 7% vacancy factor, and Ben talked about it. Well, I can tell you, New York City has 2% or less is considered optimal and good. Over 4 is considered horrendous, and it's a major crisis. And they're saying we have a 7% vacancy factor. And believe me, when somebody talks about the vacancy factor and that there are lines of people, there aren't lines of people waiting to get in here. And frankly, either your representative sample was too small or it wasn't done of late. I see vacancy signs all over town. It's a problem. There's another thing. We're told by the college no net increase in transfer students. And it's kind of interesting, but I'm looking at the college's housing requirements, and it says the only way you can live off campus is to be a transfer student. And they're going to be transfer students, and then there's this one, which is a real tip. It says we want to get the commuters who are currently traveling from surrounding communities and missing out on the campus and village and town experience. Well, does that mean if we put them in here that they'll miss out on the commuting experience? I mean, they tell me. It's incredible. But anyway, so why do you? This community wants it both ways. They don't want, if they're the college building it, they have to have prevailing wage. So it's a private enterprise paying it. So they don't have to pay prevailing wage to their employees. But when they want it, it's the college owns it, so they don't have to pay taxes. I want to give you one scenario. You say you guys aren't tied to IDA, and I looked at this thing, and they tell you, don't worry about it, we'll take it with the IDA. Here's the deal. I have a great fear, and I'm not saying this is their plan or it's going to happen, but they come to you and they say, look, it's IDA, it isn't you fellas, it isn't you. So you say, okay, go ahead. The IDA has no nexus to what we're doing. They go to the IDA, they sit down, they work a deal out, and they say, you know what? We just couldn't come to an agreement. Now we have to fall back on the original position, which is this is college land, not-for-profit land. You don't get anything. So that's what I believe is there is a possible plan. I don't like it, and I think you've gotta link the thing. And Wilmerite, listen guys, this is a town made up of people who come here and contribute. I don't know why you're not saying, hey, I wanna be in here, I wanna give you guys our assurances that we intend to pay the full and fair taxes that we owe. My God, you're getting a terrific deal. You're getting linked up with the college. You'll never have a vacancy. You can just knock on the president's door and say, bring in more students. You won't have a vacancy factor at all. But you want us to carry it. It's not right. I don't know why. And also, I've heard an objection raised that that the applicant won't give us conservation easements because they're a not-for-profit and they can't bind it. They can't bind it, come on. They just, what 40-year leases does not bind them, huh? I mean, how silly is that? So the last thing is, you guys have to ask for the production of all the legal documents, the leases and everything else. And if you say, why, that isn't for you guys, that's private business, what about that friend of mine who came in here and paid $6,000? He had to give you his deeds, he had to give you a conservation easement, and you would give him a boundary line transfer until he gave you all those issues. I think you should ask for it, you should demand it, and I think you should also go back, and I hope you will keep this. You know, a representative from the college said there were many fallacies going around, and he was going to correct them later, and please close this meeting because it's like water torture. You know, well, water torture. You know, that was water torture. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed gave up the information through waterboarding. Maybe we need more information from the college, too.
Thank you, Bob. All right. We'll listen to you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to the public hearing right now?
I would.
Adriana? Ariana. I don't know why I keep going there.
My name is Ariana Basco. I'm on the New Paltz Village Board. I am obviously a village resident. And I mean, you've heard me say my piece, so I'm just going to ask that you keep the public hearing open on the draft environmental impact statement. One of the main reasons being that none of the students are here for this period of time to see the closing of it. And I know that there are people who would want to be here and speak to this more, and the small vocal minority is really not a small vocal minority. There is, you know, there's over 30 campus clubs and organizations who signed on to that letter that was read here at a public hearing, and I know that they all want to have more input into this and more time to look at the large document that none of them are qualified to read. So I think that, you know, they are really trying their best, and they're seeking more input from people who are experts. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay.
I came late, and I'm sorry, and a lot of the questions. My name is Rachel Legata, and I live in the village. I would like to know when if you're going to make a decision tonight as to whether or not to keep the public hearing open, or whether you have indeed already made the decision not to.
We'll be discussing that when I conclude the public input.
So that means that you haven't made the decision, but you will after you discuss it?
We're going to discuss it, yes.
Okay. Okay, so you are going to discuss it, but you've already made the decision? Or I'm just trying to get an answer to my question.
We're going to discuss whether we continue the public hearing or we close it and take in written comments on it.
Okay, so
right.
you are going to make that decision. You haven't made it yet. Thank you. There are so many questions that have been raised here that I think that it would be unfair to the public to close it. And one question I would like to ask, or would like to have investigated and have the research done on, which, you know, if I had the time, I would do it myself. But there was a huge project before the village, Woodland Pond, and the developers made all sorts of economic promises, and they received a pilot. And I think that it would be very useful to compare what it was the developers said were, you know, the expectations that the village could have in terms of occupancy, in terms of affordability especially, and what actually ended up being the delivery, what the actual occupancy rate is, how affordable it actually is, and what exactly is going on there. Because I think that, you know, it's easy to sort of take all these promises and be very hopeful that, you know, people are going to be, that these things are going to be affordable and that things are going to work out. But I think you have to take a harder look at it, and you also have to take a look at, you know, what came before and then what actually happened. And I think that the affordability might just be the crux. I mean, just even given the sort of irrationality of a campus that's supposed to be looking forward and looking toward, you know, the future and, you know, the incredible disasters that we've had as a result of global warming and our necessity to get off of carbon, our dependence on carbon fuel. That any building that's looking toward the future ought not to be made to look like a townhouse, which is what this particular, it's a McTownhouse development. We've had so many of these. They're always, there's no point to building that sort of thing now. It doesn't make any sense. You're going to have to convert it later, that sort of thing. But I feel like regardless of what they build, if it's not affordable, it's going to fail. And then you will be left with, you know, maybe a half-empty development like you have at Woodland Pond. And so I feel like it's really, of all the studies that you've been asked to asked to perform now, it's going to take a long time to actually do those. I mean, especially when you have things like vacancy statistics in dispute, which are crucial. When you have a piece of information that crucial that's in dispute, you know, all of what is being claimed as a benefit for this project sort of hinges on those things. And if those things aren't real, then what do you have? And that's about it. I mean, the taxes is a huge issue, and I feel like this has to be considered, people's economic situation. We're not in a growing economy where you can just expect that if you build it, they will come, because that may have been true. It may have been true in other times in our history, but it's not really true right now. We're in a sort of a decline, and it's very hard for the people who already live here to be able to afford to stay here. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Just one last time. One last time and four hands go. Okay, we'll go around that way. We'll say Paul for your name, please.
Joan Bender.
Okay.
I'm a graduate student at SUNY New Paltz, and I'll be real quick. I've heard about Wilmorite, and maybe this is naive of me, but I wondered if there's a competitor to Wilmorite that is willing to lease from the SUNY New Paltz Foundation, that is willing to forego the tax abatement advantages of the pilot program. Secondly, as a student, I have a perspective of, yes, we need housing, and I know that we need housing, but I also have seen how SUNY has managed things and not been happy always with it. One example in the music building is that they took away some of our practice rooms to use for housing, and we only had like 6 practice rooms to begin with, which was under what was needed for National Association of Schools of Music. When they took away those practice rooms, I mean, I guess they needed them for the students, but I also felt like they were thinking about the money before the students' needs, and I feel like that has been a common theme. They promised the music therapy graduate school students, all of them, on their website for the 3 years I've been attending, for us to have music lessons. And we haven't been able, at least I haven't, my request has been repeatedly denied over a year for these lessons, which that sounds minor, but they have not managed our program in a way that I feel like they can't manage our music therapy program. How can they manage this? Our students, some of them have gone through the program, an internship, and not have on-site training by music therapy professionals like they're supposed to have. Sorry, I'm nervous. I know in response to my complaints, the chair of the department basically ridiculed me when I brought these things up. She said I just needed to know how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. They went off on a 10-day trip to China, 5 of the professors. They're turning down money from me and other students that are willing to pay these applied music lesson fees for $450 a pop, but yet they have the money to do what they want to do, to take over 14 foreign trips in a year. And I complained about it. I definitely complained about it, and I've experienced retaliation because of that, being advised to drop internship, being told to take time off of the program when I had straight A's, so I could go and take music lessons. So when I hear all of this, I'm not convinced that SUNY New Paltz is good neighbors. I'm not convinced. I've been stonewalled and talking to upper administrators, like the provost. I've not been able to talk to him, even though I talked to many other people over a year about these problems. And I'm told that the professor that I wanted to study with doesn't have time to teach me. This euphemism was used again when I applied to an internship site and was accepted. I get a call the next day saying they don't have time for me. I feel like they cover things up. My jury sheet that I got where they said I wasn't proficient on piano, it was suddenly blank. When I asked for a copy of it, it changed to a blank sheet. And I just feel like you definitely need to have an independent person look at this, because I feel like in my dealings with him, I've had so much resistance just to get the lessons that I am paying for, and that they advertise on their website, a very, very small thing, very, very small. And I've had so much resistance from the university, and yet they're powerful, and they need to have, you guys need to have somebody else looking at this, because they're very powerful, and they can change things to look to their advantage, and they think about their advantage and the money first, the students second. And I'm sorry to say this, but that is how I feel, and it's been very, very upsetting experience for me, and thank you for letting me air this complaint, and please, please have other people look at this. I'm not against them making money or having housing, but they are turning down my money and other students' money for music lessons, and I don't know why they're doing that, and then yet wanting to do these fancy projects.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
I'm Mary Kastner, I live in the town, and I would just like to encourage the board to please consider closing this. I've been to a number of these sessions, and I believe that the town local paper has covered this quite well, and I'm not hearing anything really new, and I think it's time to take the information you have and work with it and keep going.
Thank you, Mary. Paul?
Mary, I'll try and give you something new. Be careful what you wish for. I'd like to thank the board for keeping the public hearing open at least this long, because you get to hear things and stimulates thinking. I'm a little disappointed the students aren't here, because they're the ones that kept me going and said, oh, those are interesting thoughts. By the way, I was, so I wanted to say that what happened during this interim where you held it open was somebody at the gym said, have I heard about Vineyard Commons? And I had never heard of Vineyard Commons, and I live right next door to Highland, and that's a big project there. And the planning board worked hard, and I know several of the members of the planning board, and the town, and it was all over. But I think they reached their level of incompetence in the town of Highland, and that's not meant as an insult. It's like every one of us here, we've never dealt with this before. By the way, the college administrators have never dealt with this. We're all getting into a new boat here. I think Wilmerite can teach us, and I believe they want to. I believe they want to make a profit, but I don't think we're sharing openly the data. And so if the public hearing has something to do with that sharing, then that's your consideration. But I thank you, because this is a page. I want to say also that the New Paltz Times does report accurately, the most accurately in the Mid-Hudson Valley, as far as I'm concerned, and one of those reporters is here tonight who does that very well. I want to go on the public record as saying. But this is another paper, but it says taxpayers on the hook. Vineyard Commons loan fails, they've gone bankrupt. We can't prevent Wilmerite, and I don't think they will go bankrupt, but the town never understood the muddy waters it was getting into. And we need to, and you are the lead agency. I don't think, when I took on lead agency, when I was chair of this board, I really understood it until I did one or two. So maybe you wish you weren't lead agency, but you have to not only look at this for the subdivision application that's before us, and for the site plan application, but you have to lead all the other agencies and get the information they need, including the IDA, including the IDA. And you can, in your findings, say that we've done it. This subdivision, spend all your money, you gotta have sidewalks. That's it, and it's contingent. Put the sidewalks in, you get your subdivision. You don't put your sidewalk in, no subdivision, that's it, simple. IDA, okay, if you pay your fair share, all of this, it's affordable for the town, it doesn't affect the character, it doesn't affect the taxpayers, the school, you're paying your fair share, welcome, come on board, we like you all. And I think they're likable people, I think they have integrity, I'm proud that they want to come to New Paltz, but pay their fair share. If it doesn't have full taxable revenues, based on the numbers that Mr. Loza gave, or whatever best one, don't come, thank you very much. But we need people to pay their fair share. And that's part of the finding statement, and that's part of the contingency for the subdivision approval, which empowers a lot of this deal, plus the site plan. So you're the lead agency, and you've got it. And we're here to help, all right? And I mean that because I think everything here is to help. So I got a chance, and I rehearsed this, and I can do this in less than 5 minutes. But I beg your indulgence because I truly believe in that we're going to have a positive outcome of this thing if we all listen to one another. So, the applicant states all about the DIS. I'm not going to waste my time reading what the applicant said, but it's 50 acres in the whole project. What is the planning board enabling? And I want to turn attention also to the subdivision, because you're doing a subdivision. I believe this hearing is for both.
Yes.
All right, so we're doing a subdivision here, which enables things. You're enabling the process, plus the site plan approval, which is codified and is pretty straightforward. But you're enabling a whole bunch of things to happen. I don't think we understand the long-term consequences of, and it's these unplanned consequences that happen to the town of Lloyd that we must prevent from happening in New Paltz, for the applicant, for the college, for all of us. What is the planning board enabling by approving the creation of an 8.16 acre parcel that's separate from the 41.86 parcel which is proposed for the 13 buildings and community center? I wouldn't want my septic tank on my neighbor's land. I think that it's important to control these things. I don't understand that. What are the implications of and I think the applicant has to make it clear to everybody, plain English. What are the implications of having a vital water treatment and wastewater treatment on a separate parcel of land? Who will own this land? Will the sewer district be formed? Who will control and be responsible for the day-to-day operation of the treatment plants? Who will own each of the parcels at each point of the project? Since the water and wastewater treatment plants will be currently on privately owned land by JAM Incorporated, how will the taxation of the land and the improvements be handled? Because there's a distinction between the 8 acres and the 42 acres with regard to taxability, and we can't clump them all together. I think it's all getting lost in the sauce. It might. It won't now. What legal agreements, laws, and regulations govern this operation? What will be the cost to the town of New Paltz to monitor the operation? Suppose the town never takes it. It's being offered, I understand. But what does it cost now? Stacy, it's one person, and now we're putting 732 residents. What can she inspect? Who does this? And who makes sure that SBR plant, although I've heard now it won't be an SBR plant. So when is this thing frozen, and what are you approving? We need to protect the health and safety of the 700 residents. That's the government and our fellow residents' responsibility. Now, the subdivision of lands. Considering the 8 acre parcel is currently zoned R1, what structures can be legally built there? Will that 8 acres have to be rezoned? It can be done, but we need to understand that. What structures and operations would the planning board be enabling if it grants the applicant's request? I mean, what's in there? What are the details? I can't figure it out, and I've read it. Would this subdivision application be part of a separate public hearing, just the subdivision? Now I realize we're having it, but you can open it up again if it gets hairy. How would it impact neighbors living in adjacent and nearby residential parcels? You see, the remaining JAM lands are all R1, and there's neighbors who live on Jansen Road. Well, what's going to be in their backyard? Is this going to become more student housing, or is it going to be R1? And if it is R1, what about the people who live in the 260 acre, the remaining JAM lands? So we've got to think about them. What would be the impact on the remaining 290? I've asked that. Consider the fate of similar restricted residents, and here's the interesting thing about Vineyard Commons. It's a restricted rental for a certain group of people based on age. And the applicant told the town of Lloyd that Vineyard Commons would have just these elderly folks there. But they didn't. They didn't fill it, so now they start renting to non-rent. So they got a lawsuit from their own residents. And they never have rented the place out, which I don't understand. Where's all their fiscal impact statements? We won't suffer that fate in New Paltz if we do our job right. How will the applicant guarantee that they will not change the demographics of their proposed rental occupants if the rental market fails? They'll come back to us and say, could we do this, could we do that? And Town of Lloyd's feeling that pressure now. By the way, the Town of Lloyd is suing them because they're not paying some of their agreements or whatever they were. What recourse will the Town of New Paltz have if financial or other conditions change? What are the nuances and distinctions between this project with its complex arrangements and not-for-profit as compared to that? How can they assure us that this won't happen here? The applicant is also proposing, and this to me is really at the heart of the trust and the being a good neighbor. The applicant is proposing a public-private partnership at the heart of the project. It talks about it in the 8-acre land and the operation of the water treatment. I look forward to that. But in the spirit of full disclosure, typical of any healthy partnership, how is the applicant, who has a lot more experience in this than either the college or the town, how is the applicant, Wilmerite, planning to respond and help us to all these probing questions? I heard frustration at this planning board at previous meetings saying, you tell us one thing, you say that depends on the college, but the college isn't at the table, so they can't answer this. Or we don't know that number yet, but we do know what the rents are going to be. So there's a little frustration that I had as a listener and an observer of the public process that we're not getting that full disclosure and open due diligence. I'll help you do due diligence on my part. You help me do it on yours. I want to see that. What exactly and specifically are the present and future roles, responsibilities, commitments, promises, and liabilities of all parties involved? That's Wilmerite, JAM, SUNY New Paltz, the town of New Paltz. By the way, page 14 says in the DEIS, this is the full DEIS now, payments to the town of New Paltz will be made with little or no town, fire, police emergency, or other services needed or provided. I've questioned that before. I'm not going to repeat myself, but it's throughout. It's replete with the same errors. The DIS suffers the same errors as the FEIS. So it's all suspect, and I'm sorry about that, but we'll make it better. Because it's our town, FEIS. You can throw out the whole thing, have a 2-page finding statement, and do whatever you want. Approve what you want, don't approve it. Make it contingent, don't make it contingent. The applicant says on page 14, construction of a wastewater treatment facility with capabilities for possible expansion for town use. What is the applicant exactly and precisely trying to communicate with this qualified statement? I have several more questions. They're in my written document. The applicant offers 8 acres of land to the town of New Paltz, or offering as one of the benefits, offering. Well, I'd like to look at that offer. What is the offer? Does our town supervisor understand the offer? What are we getting for it? Does the town council? Will this be a cost-free dedication of lands? What is this offer? I want to see it written. I want it to translate into a signed agreement between the town, made a contingency of the planning board approval. You have the right to do that. You're the lead agency. What's the current and proposed future ownership of the 8-acre parcel? Will a profit be made on the operation of the proposed well water treatment and wastewater treatment? If so, who makes the profit? And what if they go broke and the town of New Paltz suddenly has 732 people who can't flush their toilet? They say there will be payments to the town. It offers future payments. Was that for 45 years, 40 years, 46 years? How much? Annually? One-time payment? Will it include a ladder truck? The applicant points to another benefit. Revenue to the New Paltz, this is an interesting statement. The applicant points to the benefit of the project as revenue to the New Paltz Central School District with virtually no services required. Very interesting. Exactly what revenues are being offered to the school district? exactly how much. We need that full disclosure with a public-private partnership. So where is the open, honest communication here? For how many years will this revenue be paid? Will it be paid regularly, on time, as regular taxes have to be? Will the revenue increase as assessed valuation for this for-profit project increases? What legally binds the applicant and the successors and heirs to continue making the payment of these revenues? What recourse does the school district have if the payment schedule isn't met? We know what happens when you don't pay your taxes. What about these things? What about Vineyard Commons in the town of Lloyd? What is the applicant offering? I'm asking it, so they have to answer it now because it's in the public record. Why is the applicant offering revenues to the school district, considering that according to the applicant, virtually no services will be required? I can't eat that and make it taste good. I just don't get it. You give them the lion's share of the money, but there's no cost. So, page 31, the applicant says it is anticipated at some point in the future and upon the completion of operation of this water treatment and wastewater treatment, but although it only says wastewater treatment, so I want to know what happens to the water treatment. Let's not bundle those together. Let's separate them. And what about this infrastructure? Who owns the pipes? And what is going to be dedicated and what isn't? And there's been a substantial monetary investment by the project sponsor. I think that's Wilmerite, but sometimes I hear it's the college, and we need to understand that. I think it is Wilmerite. And capital expenditures of theirs, and JM in terms of the land, so it's 8 acres. Well, in view of the reference to the public-private partnership, what are the exact and specific details? What will the applicant, Wilmerite, JM of New Paltz, another signee of this, SUNY New Paltz, and the town, what is the 3 applicants going to give the town, so we don't have to expend our tax money, to help them understand all the details and nuances of this proposed public-private partnership that is supposed to take place with the 8 acres and the water treatment and the sewage treatment? We need to know that. I respectfully request that the applicant be required to answer all the questions raised in this public hearing comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Miriam Strauss, Town of New Paltz. I very much would like you to keep the hearing open beyond this date. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have a motion to close the public hearing tonight and have it our discussion of where we go from there.
Make a motion.
Thank you.
Close the public hearing or just for tonight?
For tonight, right now, I want to have a discussion.
Okay, second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, first note on the agenda. Couple of things that I just want to raise, and we won't be able to public here. New Paltz Planning Board, and Bob brought it up, has established escrow accounts for all applications. The applicant pays for the services rendered by our paid consultants, the town engineer, town attorney. We do have a traffic consultant on board on this project. We do have a wetlands inspector on board on this project. We do have a couple other people on board with this, experts, and they're being paid for by the applicant. As far as an independent, an issue was raised on an independent economic or fiscal analysis expert, we fully intend to hire our own fiscal expert in conjunction with the town board to review all the information that we need. A lot of it's generated in the town itself, but projections out on costs and impacts going forward. So for those that are saying that the only information you're receiving is from the applicant, that's not true. We do, every one of our experts are independent of them and do their work for us for that. Public has raised a lot of issues going forward. We've had the transcript open and public hearing open for a long time. A lot of the same questions are coming up. We need to be able to do the work necessary to get the answers to those questions. Because I think my feeling is that the same questions will continue to be raised until we do the work going forward, and come up with a, I'll call it the final document. And final is in quotes because it's a draft. It will always be a draft in the time being. But the fiscal analysis, fiscal impacts. Even the planning board members aren't comfortable. I shouldn't say comfortable. Don't agree with the numbers that are in the fiscal impact that was submitted by the applicant, and knew full well that we have to do our own fiscal impact on it to come up with that. Not only for what the DEIS is, but we need to do it for the town, for their information also, and obviously for the IDA to go forward on that. So we fully believe that those requirements are necessary. A lot of the other issues that have been brought up, we got to go back and get answers for them. And that's the next big step on this project. The ability of a public hearing is to get public input of things that the town or the planning board misses out on, or that other people see or have looked at. I think we've gotten a wealth of information, and they're major topics and major work that has to be done. But we have to now go out and do it and be responsive to the questions raised. Questions like Paul raised up on, that he just finished with, it's fresh on mind. But each one of those is a question that needs to be answered. And, you know, relationships between the town, JM, Wilmerite, the foundation, the college, all those have to be addressed, or from, at least from our point of view, contingent on any getting final approval that they've reached a conclusion and they're open and transparent on it. So I really think that it's like saying, okay, here's the first part of his draft environment. Here's all the things that we really got to go back in and redo. They're not adequate. They're incorrect. Numbers are wrong. Assumptions are wrong. Let's go back and do that. Get them corrected, get them updated, and get them best. We had discussions on vacancy rates. Where are the sources of this? How can we improve on getting vacancy rates? And what's the impact? Not so much do we have the right number, but what if it's 10%? What if it's 1%? Well, what's the difference? What kind of impact does that have? That's the kind of analysis that we need still to do. Then I think we come back to the public and say, look, for all the issues that you've raised, all the questions that have been put out to us, here's what we did. Here's how we answered them. Here's how we addressed all the issues on them. Take a look at it. Did we adequately supply the answers? Did we miss idea of it? Or is it still not clear? Or should there be something else that we've missed on that? But to keep going through a public hearing to hear the same issues prevents us from moving forward to answer the questions that have been already raised. That's where I'm at on this stage of the game, is that thank you for all the work assignments. Now we have to go out and do them. And now you have the opportunity after we complete them. And then, again, the questions aren't simple, and the questions aren't going to come back next week. We're not going to have the final environmental impact statement before you. And there's a lot of work that we have to do, because we're going to present that, and we won't put it out there until we're satisfied internally that we've gotten the answers to those questions. So I think it behooves us to get moving on working on that FEIS now in order to bring back that document and those studies to go forward on it and to do it as independently as we have to in areas that we have to, especially definitely in the fiscal area, because that's been a major issue. But to tackle all the other issues, we know for a full fact that there are a lot of interactions between us, the town board, dealing with water and the sewer, and the applicant. we need to address those to get them down. So rather than being articles of discussion, there are documents in place that this is what we think is the way we're gonna go forward with that. And then show that as part of our final environmental impact statement, so the public can say, okay, now I understand the relationship, now I understand what's giving, what's not giving, and who's taking what responsibilities on it. So my feeling on, as far as the public hearing is to take this all in and start working on getting answers out there. And if you notice, the board has been very quiet for the 3 months or 2.5 months that this application has been in a public hearing, because it's your turn, it's the public's turn to tell us what it is. And I think now it's our turn to be able to go back and answer those questions that were raised, and to make the document maybe not 500 pages, but maybe 1,000. And I'll keep the shortest version, Bob, but it will require that. And when we don't have an answer, we got to decide what we do about that, and then present that also to the public. There may be issues that aren't going to be resolved, but to know what the fiscal impacts are, to know what the full tax assessment of a project like this is, to know what the possibilities of IDA pilots or payments in lieu of taxes could be, is part of that fiscal impact. It's this, or somewhere in between. Well, what does that all mean from a town taxpayer point of view? Obviously, we don't want the taxpayers of New Paltz to pay anything more for services to a new application, and we want to ensure that he covers all the expenses that they impose upon the town. So that's part of the fiscal impacts that we have to do. But those numbers that you talked about, what's the full range of taxes, what could possibly be a pilot, we got to put that in the fiscal impact and see what it really means and what it looks like to everybody. And to have you coming back week after week to tell us, go do that, go do that. I think we're at that stage now we should go do that. And we've gotten probably over 50 now written comments on it. I strongly encourage written comments on it. I would, generally what we do is keep the, if we do close the public hearing on the DEIS, we would accept written comments for the next 10 business days, and I agreed that to be January 28th at the close of business on that Monday. But that gives us the opportunity of everything's now what the public saw at the first cut of this plan. This is what they saw are the issues. Let us go answer those questions. And maybe we come back and we have a smaller set of issues to examine with the public because we've answered some of the questions that hung out there. Maybe we address better the issue of arsenics and the mapping. Maybe we address better the wetlands and buffers that have issues that were raised, and so we narrow it down to what is the still top issues that are going forward on it. But I think we need an opportunity for the board and the consultants and our consultants to go off and do the work to get those answers to you. That's where I'm at on this at this stage of the meeting. We kind of talked about that at the last meeting. Since I opened my mouth first, I'm more than happy to take everybody else's comments now. I apologize. I'm not as good as Paul. Paul usually gets everybody out to speak first and then summarizes. But
George, I have a question for you regarding if we do close the public hearing, will the public have an opportunity to address at an open public hearing on the next stage of the project after the facts and the figures has been found?
You can certainly structure that into the process, and I think Mike alluded to that before, so that they would have the final impact document, they would have opportunity to review it, they could comment upon it, and then the board could proceed forward with its consideration of that document.
And my second part of my question, can the board implement a time frame of what requirements needed, the feedback that we need to get back to us? Say, we need the fiscal impact study done within the 3-month time frame, or does the board have any?
Well, it's
We
your
retain the
document, so as soon as
Right.
you're ready to do it, you can do it. I mean, if there's information you need from the applicant or some other agency, you can certainly anticipate, you can communicate your expectation about when you'd be ready to act, when you need information.
It usually works with the applicant, it doesn't always work with DOT. So I mean, just that's the kind of things that George was alluding to, but, yes. Okay. Kim? See, when you sit at the end of the table, you always get started one way or the other.
So if we close the public hearing, then that allows us to start responding to the questions, and we can have the applicant respond to the questions. So then that helps us create the draft FEIS, correct?
Right.
So then we have the option to reopen the public hearing, right?
Or have a.
Or basically have a public hearing.
It would be a
on-
different public.
It would be a different public hearing.
A different type of, okay, so a public hearing of
On
the
the
draft
on-
FEIS. So in that public hearing, if new questions are brought up, how is that handled in terms of the draft FEIS? Do we, is like once a draft FEIS is created, like how draft is it?
As draft as you want it to be. You know, the final environmental impact statements is a board document, so if the questions come up or significance that we think are important, that should be addressed in that FEIS. We go back and address it. So it's another, might be another round going through that, but I'm sure that the draft, my personal opinion, draft FEIS is a document to be taken a look at and to go through at with a larger group and to make changes in it. It's nothing written in stone at that stage of the game. But the board has to be comfortable that we've answered as best we can with as much knowledge as we know that exists. And we think this is the best way to answer that. That's what the board has to do on that. So if something new comes up, we feel we have to address it, we address it the best way we can until we're satisfied we've addressed it. Okay? That's where we would go on that. There's a lot of issues out here, that's why I'm saying I would be very comfortable opening up a public hearing on the FEIS, because it isn't like one or two things and we can solve that and go forward.
Right.
There's a lot of things that
So
need to be addressed.
is that how we get the public comfortable with the idea that we're closing public comment now to kind of move the ball forward so there actually is another document to be reviewed?
Yes. They've raised a lot of questions and I'm the impression it's our turn to do the work to respond to those things. And to the extent that something new comes up, or not even, to the extent that we finish it and we're satisfied with the draft FEIS, that we go back to the public and say, look, this is the way we've answered all the questions that have been raised, this is the way we've documented it, take a look at it, see if we missed anything, and that's when the public can come back in and point out some things. Now, people always disagree, then the board has to take into consideration what the comments are and go forward from there.
I just had a question. You keep saying that we're going back and doing the work. I understood that that Wilmerite has to revise their plan, revise the DEIS for us to now review, right? Based on these comments, they're going to be revising that document, which is now going to be part of what we're reviewing, correct? Or are we going to be still reviewing the document with all of the comments? Because there's been, I think last time they said they've been amending it kind of as we go. So at what juncture are we getting the revised document, or are we not?
Well, we'll get a revised document. Obviously, a lot of the work that has to be done, better descriptions, better information, it's part of the things that Wilmerite is doing as we've been going forward on that. And it has to satisfy us on responses. There are areas that we have to examine independently of Wilmerite doing that, and that's what we have to do going forward. But I would suspect that we would be reviewing
The existing document?
refined, a much detailed existing document by sections. Okay, let's take wetlands. Here are all the comments that were raised for wetlands, here's what were written previously. Now, have these comments been addressed, been answered, and where are they in the revision of the wetland section? Traffic, okay, there are the comments that have been raised on traffic issues. Where's the information that answers these questions on traffic? And that's how we review it, and we kind of build a building block of the FEIS going forward.
I guess my concern, though, is that we're gonna be maybe looking at this in parts as opposed to, because we're gonna focus on sections. And I think, you know, this is a comprehensive document. It should be looked at in its totality.
Yes.
So I think, you know, and that's where we go back to, you know, the fiscal. I guess I'm a little bit concerned that we haven't even started interviewing anybody for that, number one. And then I'm gonna again say that I think it would be helpful to have a planning firm assist the board going through the process. And I've said that before, I'm becoming a broken record. But I think there's so much here. It's a big project for the community, and it's a lot of time for board members, and extensive amount of time for board members to spend on this. As the local representative, it's nice to have somebody that's being more the generalist. We have energy, we have environmental, we have green design and infrastructure, we have traffic, we have multimodal things, we have the fiscal impact, we obviously have engineering, and we have the legal impacts. You know, there's so many different things that I think, you know, a good experienced generalist firm would be, you know, would be helpful.
Lynn?
Well, as I've been hearing questions, I would like to be able to post on the town website just a list of the questions that have been asked, so that people will know that these things are being looked into. It often strikes me that, you know, people come not realizing that other people have already asked about these things, that they seem to have no idea who's looking at what, whether the things have been asked before or not. And so just having that, a list of the questions, and I know we've asked for such a list to be produced, summarized from the many public comments that we've gotten. It would just save people a certain amount of trouble to know, you know, what is already out there, and if they do have something that is different, they would know that. And I'm wondering, of course we have to say, okay, we're gonna stop taking input now so that we can deal with what we already have. But if there's a way of sort of finding new questions and at least holding them somewhere as they come in, if they come in on new things, rather than, and keeping them in mind, even though it's not the official public hearing status, that we can be made aware of them, and, you know, opportunities in the discussions will come up where we can say, oh yeah, and by the way, we're wondering about this. Is there any way to do that? Can that be fit in somehow?
Well, I think I want Dave to give a summary of what he's been doing.
I put together, I think you've seen the information. I tried to put together transcripts, public comments, written public comments. I think I had 7 pages of comments. Many of them were repeated quite a bit. I also have put together just comments from the board's discussion that weren't particularly covered in the public comments, and I have a list of those too, with quite a list.
Yeah, I couldn't find it when I looked on my computer. Could you send it to me again?
I think I have a copy of them if you want.
Peter.
Okay,
But may I just ask
Sure.
a question about that? Like, is there a process, Dave, where we can then, you know, share our inventory of comments and questions with the public, and, you know, just so it's as transparent as possible?
Well, that's what I was trying to get to
Like,
Lynn
is it a
about.
website, can,
Yeah.
you know,
That's why I was getting to Dave. Dave has this list that we were talking
December
about.
24th, Dave?
That was
That's
the
your
one.
list.
No, I don't,
As
I
of
don't
right
know
now.
this list, but how do,
Right.
December 24th?
I was thinking,
What's the latest?
There's another list just of board comments too.
what I was thinking, Tim, was that, getting back to Lynn's comments, is that we put a spot on the webpage, and these are the issues that have been raised, that we have documented out, on it, and it'd be similar to,
so on the town's webpage?
it would be on the planning board webpage,
Sounds like it's.
so people could see. Yeah, okay, getting back to Lynn's question, yeah, that issue's been raised, or they talked about that, let's see what comes back in the FEIS and see if it's responsive to it.
I think that would be helpful, is that it was a website capable of doing that, has been updated. You know, I don't know if it's been updated to,
There's
Your
two
lab,
websites
so-
that we're have access to. One is the applicant's,
right,
which I think is probably more flexible.
yeah.
The other is the town, which I'm not sure about
Yeah,
the
I'm not
status.
sure either.
We will.
But we could put a link on the town website
Yeah.
Yeah.
to the appropriate spot.
So that's right, yeah, that's what I would think to do that. Getting back to your second part of the question, if somebody comes up in the middle of, February with a question that really wasn't on the list or not on it. We always had parking lots, or parking spaces. Let's park that one there and put it there, not to lose it, but to keep it in mind. And as we go through the document, see if we've captured that, or, you know, do we use it as a comment on our FEIS?
Uh-huh.
So we don't lose that one. So it could be a preliminary to a public comment on an FEIS.
So we can highlight it in purple or something.
Yeah. We wouldn't lose it. That's what I mean. If it came in after we closed the acceptance, it's just that we have to close it to begin to answer the questions. Otherwise, we never start and get to a point of answering questions.
Yeah, I understand.
So it still captures your point about if someone saw the list and it was 5 days after we closed it and said, oh, what about this section here? They could still send in a comment on that. And we could post it, we could put in, quote, the parking lot and try to address it either. If it's early enough in the DEIS, or if it's not, in a review of the FEIS.
Thank you.
Peter?
Okay. Well, today we heard a couple old new things, thanks to Jonathan coming in. And those topics have been mentioned very early on, but then they sort of got lost. And that's the bypass that we initially did insist on, and then sort of got dropped someplace. I think it's a really important issue and has to be revisited and included. If we were to close the public hearing for now, I'd like to see us make a commitment as a board to reopen or open a public hearing once the FIS is published.
I think we can take it as a motion to do it, or we can acknowledge it in the minutes any which way if the board's comfortable with. I just want to get through everybody on it. Tom, did you have anything else to plan?
I agree
yeah.
with Peter. I think as a board, we should commit ourselves to reopen a public hearing.
We will have a, okay, I will make a couple of motions. The first motion is to completion of the draft FEIS, Final Environmental Impact Statement, that we open a public hearing to discuss, to allow the public to comment on our FEIS. And that's ready to go.
Michael, should your motion actually be to, if we're closing the public portion, that it's gonna be written comments are accepted until
I'll
a
do that
certain
next.
date? Okay.
I just wanted to get
Okay.
Peter's point that, and give the public acknowledgement that we will open it for the final environmental impact statement. Tim's acknowledging that.
Wait, so you're making a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay, I second the motion.
Tim seconds it. Any further discussion on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing on the draft environmental impact statement, that we allow written comments to the board up until the close of business on January 28th. And that to the extent that we can get Dave's list of the issues that have been raised in the public hearing up on a website for the public to acknowledge that as quickly as possible.
Can we just close it, I mean, keep it open to the end of the month or something even instead of the 28th? I mean, does it matter?
Well, it's usually 10 days. I don't know what the 31st is
It's
different.
Thursday.
Just, yeah.
Thursday.
You want to keep it open to
Just keep it
January
to- yeah,
31st?
31st, just-
January 31st. I'll amend that.
Just a random-
Friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Once again, for the public here, thank you very much. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you, I appreciate you coming out and raising the issues up that we have. I will say that you gave us a crap load of work to respond to. I hope we do it in a fair and equitable manner, that we respond to the questions that were raised and address it. Whether you agree or not agree with how we address it, we will try to address it. We know there's a lot of issues still outstanding that need to be resolved, but it allows us to get back in and start working on those issues and getting resolutions, so you see something going forward on it. So again, I want to thank you for coming out and staying here and going through Monday night's public hearing. Thank you. We will be reviewing the applicant. Yeah, a little bit. I gotta, just to get up to speed. We'll see how long we last. I got a cough drop, Lynn.
They don't help.
They don't help?
Thanks.
I carried 3 of them down to my meeting today. I was through them and I'm dying on the ride home on the bus trying to... Got the hack, I just couldn't get rid of it.
Thanks.
Sure. But they just haven't.
George, I have a very basic question. What if, let's say, a church that's tax exempt for real estate taxes decides to raise money by putting a 7-Eleven on its property? Would that operation be tax exempt as far as property tax is concerned?
An interesting.
These are frankly just to-do lists.
Pardon me?
What are we going over tonight?
Tonight we're going to answer some of the questions that came up in the last meeting.
Okay.
Specifically, one, the major one I think is NGBS and LEED having a conversation of the comparison. Green infrastructure. Well, we have, I'll wait for Mike to come back. Sure. Do you want to start here? You want?
What? Introduce.
So I'm again Tom George, Jim McKenna, Phil LaRock, Craig Jensen.
Phil LaRock is our third-party green consultant, and NGB, NGBS certified.
Verifier.
Craig Jensen is our lead architect on the project, who also is lead certified, correct?
I am not.
You're not.
Our firm has several
Your firm is.
certified professionals.
Okay. So, Craig being the lead architect for the project, thought it was very important in discussing any portion of the design. And Phil is here to speak to all the green infrastructure and the NGBS standard and the NGBS infrastructure that we're putting in.
Yes. So in direct response to some of the questions that came up last meeting, that was obviously one of the most significant things that kind of continues to go on. We've had many conversations about it, so that's why we wanted him to come in. He's prepared a letter and some reports, and I'll let him go over those things, but just real quickly, we're going to go over that, and then we're going to go over some of the which is another part of the green infrastructure, is the park banking. We've tried to prepare a more clear document and map that illustrates how much park banking we're proposing, and the percentages of that, and what are required by the existing zoning. We also have from the college their sketch for the connection in the northwest corner of the property that has been requested from the planning board. So they've provided that, an illustration as a preliminary sketch, but this is the commitment that they've made to doing the work on their side of the road or the property. In addition to that, I know it's been asked several times, and I thought it was in the DEIS submittal, but there is a comprehensive master plan that the university has, as well as a landscape plan that I have with me, but those will also be introduced in our final EIS as well. But I think the most important thing was what they're doing on their side of the property at the connection point. So I have illustrations of that.
Checklist comparison?
We're gonna have Phil's gonna go just briefly through his letter and his background, but we went back and took our project as it's been designed and scored it, both the NGBS scoring tool and through LEED scoring tool as well. And I'll let Phil introduce that and review all those, well, not all those parts, but just a summary of where we scored, why we scored that way, and I guess we'll open the conversation from there. So with that, I have copies for everybody of this letter that really is just, pass around. This is from Phil. You don't have to read it verbatim, but ultimately the reports are included.
Well, okay, but I was allowed to ask the first question.
Sorry,
just to give perspective to an understanding of the difference between the NGBS and LEED standard. It has to do with more so than just summarizing the different things. I want to, from a design point of view, one of the things that one would do if he was following NGBS, that he may not follow doing LEEDs or vice versa.
Okay.
Just to get, way up here, I don't have to get down to, which point is which point, but just, you're in the design stage, or you're in the first step, I'm gonna design this to a LEED standard. No, I'm gonna design this to an NGBS. What different things go through your mind when you're at that kind of level of, I'm designing this now, what am I looking for? I wanna get a certification in this one or that one. What do I lean on and why?
Okay. Well, first of all, there was a study done in Cincinnati, which I believe you all have, which was very thorough, and to their credit, came up with a resolution that both studies are so close that both should be allowed to be made eligible to meet the property tax abatement standard within the city of Cincinnati. One thing that there you go. I've been trying to get mine that big. And that's actually legible. Well done.
It's actually legible.
Yes. But the bottom line is, this is the best study that's been done. Okay, we have studies from the NHB Research Center that talk about comparisons and so on. I'm going to summarize just a couple of things. First of all, the NGBS standard does much more. It's much more comprehensive on the lot design and land development in terms of making sure that the builder trying to be certified under NGBS pays particular attention to the land development, land use, lot design, than LEED does. The homeowner maintenance at the other end, in this case it will be tenant education and it will be project manager and then building management education and maintenance manuals are very, very detailed in the NGBS. Not quite so much with LEED. They're acceptable for sure. But if you go through this particular comparison, at the end they come to the resolution that the one thing that seems to be the difference is that the NGBS does not mandate Energy Star, okay, on the energy efficiency component, which I know is extremely important to the town. In fact, you have a law that requires Energy Star. There are issues with that in terms of your proper filings and so on, but we're not here to talk about that at this point. But the fact that Energy Star is required, we were talking about that anyway, to be very honest with you. So one of the things we're looking at is doing Energy Star. So the issue that the Cincinnati study brought out is kind of moot, because we're going to be doing Energy Star. Number one, you require it. Number two, we were leaning to do that anyway, okay, as good public policy. In addition, the Green Building Standard does have, one thing they really didn't stress in that study is that they talked about the proprietary prescriptive path as the energy efficiency path that the NGBS takes versus the lead path for energy efficiency. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, a prescriptive path is where, and I've done this, where doing the verifications on the NGBS, I have a long checklist, everything from fenestration rate on windows to the U factor on the windows to the insulation to Energy Star appliances, everything possible under energy consumption and savings. It's a long checklist. No test required to actually show performance.
So let me give you Energy Star refrigerator that's a 18 cubic foot, that's this design uses 560
it's either Energy Star
kilowatt hour a year.
Right.
I just put that number down.
Well, no,
I
it's
don't have to
either
come back.
Energy Star or it isn't these days, okay? But that's the prescriptive path. But I will tell you that most green building builders are doing the performance path for a few reasons. And what that really means is, to try to talk in plain language, it means that blower door tests are done to show how tight the whole building envelope is, okay? And that's what LEED likes to do too, because Energy Star requires it. I will tell you my recommendation, and the path we will follow will be the blower door and the duct leakage testing results. It will be performance path based, all right? That will show you the real numbers in every apartment unit that is built in terms of your annual utility utilization rates, how much air is actually escaping, how much cool or hot air is escaping, how much is staying in the building. So that's the performance path. They pointed out that the prescriptive path is what's used. I'm going to tell you, in this state, and most builders who are doing green building do choose the performance path, where the blower door test and the duct leakage test are required. And I assume the town is interested in seeing those kind of test results.
Well,
So-
I think, at least from my perspective, is that the predictive way, and going through it, is a summation of numbers, and doesn't take into account the
And-
interplay between the both.
Right. And that's where the performance path is favorable.
Right.
And frankly, you need to do that for Energy Star anyway. It all jives. What's nice is it's nice and coordinated, okay? So that's the path we're going to take. So lot design, the energy efficiency path, which Cincinnati was a little off on, to be honest. They said it was prescriptive. Well, there's a performance path too. Most in New York do the performance path. I will also tell you that, surprisingly, the NGBS, maybe in some people's perspective surprisingly, the NGBS actually has more mandatory items without points than LEED does, okay? I'm not going to go into all of them. They're all listed, okay? But there are more mandatory prescriptive items that they must comply with, some with points, some without points. Those are, Mike, in a 3-minute spiel, pretty much the summary of the distinctions between the two. I will also tell you the last thing, which is a huge item. It's the amount of documentation and the repetitiveness of some of the information that's required in the job of the verifier. I'm an accredited verifier for the National Green Building Standard. In the residential marketplace in today's New York, both single-family and multifamily, the National Green Building Standard is growing leaps and bounds. The LEED analysis we did, the scoring tool analysis, was LEED for homes, which is supposed to be for single-family and multifamily. I will tell you that LEED, in writing, has acknowledged that their target market is the top 5% of the residential marketplace, okay? The NGBS is better suited. We're capturing a lot of the multifamily apartment complexes like this one, to be honest. But the amount of documentation, frankly, is much more. But I will tell you that I will spend a lot of time not only inspecting the job site and verifying that something's implemented that was claimed on at least 2 site visits, I'm sure more than that. And I will be looking at all documentation relevant to back up each point claimed on each case. And LEED will be doing that too.
Flip side, an NGBS, I know I'm getting into it before you get questions.
You're stealing some of my thunder.
I know, I'm thinking it all. Land use, what does NGBS do for land use? And that's not there, or why is it there?
Well, they go from everything, I'll go right to the scoring tool, if you don't mind. Spells it out.
Guys, I'm just shooting from the top of the head, things that are in my mind, and
We look at mass transportation nearby. We look at basically pedestrian-friendly activities, meaning sidewalks and accessibility for bicycles and pedestrians. We identify community resources, okay? And the place where this project is going to maximize a lot of those points, okay, in both cases. We're going to be talking about natural resource inventories. We're going to be talking about stormwater management, which could be a big issue. You want to make sure that you don't have a lot of stormwater runoff, for instance. I don't have, without going right through this list, to be honest, the distinctions between NGBS and LEED, but I'm telling you that the lot design chapter, it's called Lot Design Preparation and Development. There's a lot more on the preparation and development. The one that is most common is basically on the mass transportation, the lot design itself, okay? But NGBS just has a lot more questions, okay, and a lot more points attributable to lot design and land
I think
development.
one quick interjection there was something that's come up a lot in the past was avoidance. I think just the term avoidance is something that's recognized in NGBS, which is in LEED. That's something that we've talked about long ago with Spider Barber in the very original conversations of going through that site and looking at quality wetlands versus non-quality wetlands, and just doing sheer avoidance of other areas that are to be preserved for quality purposes of both preservation and some of the stormwater management upgrades that they need to do on the property.
But you draw a distinction. The LEED you're speaking of, though, is you're talking about LEED for buildings. You're not talking about LEED ND, which is like neighborhood development. So so when you're comparing buildings to buildings, and I had read this, so I'm in agreement with what you're saying so far, and I had read this before, and I thought I raised this with the board a couple months ago because I had found that study, and that you needed to have Energy Star seemed to be the distinction. But in terms of site designing, there's so much more you can do. We're not looking at this from a site design perspective. I know that.
You asked for the different. Mike asked for the differences.
Right, understood.
So
but it looks at it in a good generalist way, I think. And LEED for buildings doesn't. Because it's looking at buildings. But I think the really important thing, and what we had tried to, raise on some of these, is more related to infrastructure. It's not just seeing that there's a sidewalk, it's seeing about a design that integrates the sidewalk, that really makes people want to use the bicycle, not just, we're going to throw a sidewalk in here and now we throw a bike rack and you get a point from LEED because you happen to be close to mass transit. That's not good enough, you know what I mean? And so I think that's really where, you are doing some green infrastructure with, the stormwater. It's not to mitigate stormwater, you have to mitigate stormwater, but what can you do better than that? And I think that's really where we're going to break out of this and LEED and kind of go back into more of a, just good site designing, or, better than good site designing.
I know their site designer, BME, very well, and I know Bruce Bonke's been before this board, and he was one of the authors of the lot design and land development chapter.
He handed that out.
At the NHB, when the NHB Research Center was basically retained to pull together the consensus committee for the NGBS. What I like about the NGBS is it's a whole document in one place. You pointed out the LEED ND. You're absolutely right. They do a good job with that, but that's a separate certification and a separate protocol totally. LEED, I don't think, does as good of a job on the lot design and land development, okay? I think the NGBS is very
building basis.
Right. We think part of the building, frankly, is the lot.
This is my question with that, though, is like, you're buying into the idea that with NGBS you're getting additional points because you're closer to mass transit, but I think there's a concern that the mass transit that's offered, UCAT, is not up to speed to handle the potential users, whether it's a half-hour loop, an hour loop. So I feel like you're kind of like signing off on the fact that, oh yeah, UCAT exists, but there's some concern.
Is it Tom or Tim? Tim, sorry.
That's Tom.
We're only dealing with the cards we were given. The point system is what it is, okay?
I know, I understand, but I'm looking at it from the point of like we have to look at more than just like, well, there's mass transit, or we believe there's mass transit, because I'm concerned that there really is not mass transit.
That's an issue for your environmental impact statement to talk about.
Right, we want you to dig into that. Dig into that. So it says mass transit, and
But
then
why isn't there mass transit? Why don't you get mass transit?
Because
What considered mass transit?
because I don't necessarily, like, people constantly talk about UCAT being ghost buses, and where do they get their funding from? They get it partially from the college, partially from the county. Who's to say that's gonna go away? And also, like, the UCAT doesn't even feel like it's a reasonable loop, because it's an hour loop. So how many people are gonna stand there for that length of time to actually use that bus? It just doesn't feel, it's not mass transit.
So it has to be a little bit more, so you're gonna have to think it through then and say, okay, if somebody's gonna wait for an hour, they're not gonna wait for an hour. Now what are they gonna do?
Because it was a half-hour loop, and it's become a longer loop, and there's.
Well, it's suggested
But
that.
it's based on the schedule.
It's gotta be looked
So
at.
you're gonna be providing a schedule.
Right.
One of the things, the manual we're talking about in chapter 10, okay? One of the things that you get points for is making sure you provide a public transportation schedule. So, as Tom was just saying, why wait there for an hour? If you have a schedule and you know the stop is gonna be there at 10:15, come at 10:05.
I'm just concerned that UCAT is gonna go.
Well, I know, I think.
And so you're
But are
gonna
we
get
in the
points
public
for it
transportation
today.
business, I guess?
No,
That's
that's one of the issues that we're gonna examine, because
I
because it
just
was
don't
raised
feel-
as a question. Now, we were examining Dennis is the one where I would go to, Dennis Doyle. Transportation county, to go into, how's it funded? What kind of schedule does it run? If we add a mile or 2 miles to this loop, what kind of impact does it have, and look for responses from that.
A lot
Whether
of,
they take a point or not, I think the question that you raised is what we have to answer. I don't care what.
We don't care about the points,
yeah,
as
but
much as
forget
reality.
the points. I understand the point, but I think that's an
But that's
environmental
kind
impact
of like what
statement
you
issue.
were hanging your hat on in terms of NGBS.
We're only going with what the question
But
asks.
that was the
Yeah.
example that was
Yeah,
provided,
he
is
just made
because
an
it's close
example.
to mass
Yeah,
transit.
he was providing a checkpoint example of that are both.
This is a given list, and we're not creating a public transportation system. It's really based on where, they're asking, where are you building? Does it make sense to build there? Can you maximize at least what is available for public transportation? Your question is one of quality and consistency for public transportation. And we didn't create the tool that we're using as the claim, okay? It's a checklist, Tim. That's all it is. It's 14 pages of checklist with commentary on how to put the claim in to be able to comply and get the points that I will then verify.
What level of the NAHB are you doing?
Silver.
Silver, so that's, and the level start is at bronze?
Bronze, silver, gold, emerald. And the interesting thing is, can I,
Now, I guess,
Okay.
anybody else before we take your thunder away?
what I'm gonna say will bring up other questions, I'm sure. And that's what we're here for. I want to, the bottom line is, I'm being retained to do a few things. Number one, ultimately be the verifier, as an accredited verifier on the National Green Building Standard, to make sure what is claimed by the builder is executed and implemented on the job, okay? First and foremost. It's a third-party relationship, and I'm accountable to the NHB Research Center, which is the third-party administrative entity that administers the ANSI-approved National Green Building Standard. So that's where I'm coming from, just so you know. I've also been retained, essentially, to help put together the scoring tool analysis. We've done the scoring tool together. Architect was involved. We had some engineers involved. We had Mr. Bakke involved. Wilmerite was involved, and we scored out both completely Leap for Homes and the NGBS. Okay, we're going to get into that briefly. I've got copies of the summaries with me. I will also be retaining and developing all the green building documentation for our files and submittal for certification. The NHB Research Center will do quality assurance on my submittals. So not only am I questioning what Wilmerite is producing and putting in the job site, both on-site inspection-wise and document-wise, there are engineering technicians at the Research Center that basically will be challenging everything I submit and asking questions. So there's a multi-phase, multi-tiered quality assurance product. And basically I've been involved to some degree in some of the designing and actual walls, and basically making sure the whole building envelope is as tight as we can get it, and then properly ventilated as well, okay? Which we know is important, because otherwise you're gonna have a lot of mold. I'm also an approved technician with NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, and they have a program basically with some incentives for the green residential building program. The money's frozen right now, but that's a possibility down the road.
BPI? Are you a BPI professional?
I am not.
Okay.
I am not.
And you're not, so you're not a lead professional?
No.
Correct? Okay.
No. Okay? But I basically ran an association with the foundation that oversaw the New York State Energy Star program from point zero, where you had no builders, through 2010, where we had 600 builders and 20,000 homes. So I oversaw that entire operation with the Energy Star program in New York.
So at some point you can maybe give us your resume or something, or?
Sure.
Because you didn't include it here, so.
No.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Okay,
Okay. So what we have is a basic comparison. It's a one-page comparison, and it is a generic green building practice, and then we compare the LEED for Homes chapters and then the NGBS chapters. It really matches up as close as possible the two building practice chapters using generic green building terms. This is a struggle. What they did is miraculous in Cincinnati. Trust me, the amount of resources that they have to put into the study is overwhelming, because the two are different. And if you go to that first table, the Green Building Practice Standards, I basically highlighted 6 major green building practice areas in generic terms. Design, preparation, development, and location. Those are found in 3 relatively short chapters of LEED for Homes. In chapters 1 through 3 on innovation and design process, location and linkages, and sustainable sites. This study goes into a lot more detail. I mean, they have an entire study. It's not just this table. You know, there's this executive summary, but then there's the whole study, which I don't know how many of you have looked at that. The NGBS chapter that covers all of those design, prep, development, and location is found in chapter 5, lot design, preparation, and development. Someone may ask or be thinking, where are chapters 1 through 4 in NGBS? All those are administrative chapters, protocol issues. They are not part of the standard practice points at all. We start with chapter 5. The second generic component, sustainable materials, resources, and durability. That's where all your resource recovery, your protection of windows from potential water penetration, that's where your recycling and reuse and reduce materials to get a strong structure, to make it more durable, to last a lot longer. This is a huge chapter. Both of them are chapter 6 for both of the standards. LEED calls it materials and resources, NGBS calls it resource efficiency. Extremely important and exhaustive chapter. The energy chapter, it's found in chapter 5 of LEED, energy and atmosphere, and chapter 7, energy efficiency, the NGBS. We talked a bit about that, Mike, up front in terms of performance versus prescriptive. I mean, you can ask questions on that, but I'm gonna move on because I think we covered some of the distinctions there. Water efficiency. I will tell you that what Wilmerite's talking about doing there is really maximizing the water efficiency issues. Tough chapter. That's an extremely difficult chapter because there are fewer practice points in that chapter. But things such as Energy Star dishwashers. You actually, with the Energy Star dishwasher, you can capitalize on a point system both on energy and on water conservation, which is a good thing. Frankly, low flush toilets, big, huge water saver, the biggest water saver. Lavatory faucets, basically low gallonage usage. Shower heads, the same thing. We're maximizing on all of those things, okay? Those chapters are relatively similar between the two, just different numbers. Indoor air quality, it's covered by Chapter 7 in LEED and Chapter 9 in NGBS. I'll suffice it to say, in my 14 years of working in energy efficiency and Energy Star and overseeing a program where we had incentives and we did marketing and technical training, I was rather surprised. Around 2004, about 3 or 4 years into Energy Star, we always said it's energy utilization is the key. You know, reduce your energy bill, right? Use less energy conservation, that's all that matters. Surveys started coming out with NYSERDA involved and EPA, and the number of people that cared almost as much about indoor air quality as the energy efficiency was unbelievable. It just kind of knocked us off. This was 2004. Now, it's something we should have figured out, but we had to see the survey results. Indoor air quality is extremely important, and both standards cover that extremely well. Very, very important chapter. We're going to have maximized Green Guard, green approved products for indoor and outdoor sealants, exterior and indoor sealants essentially. We're going to be using insulation that has green building standard, green approved products, okay? Carpets. Carpets today are, frankly, there's a lot of different products that are green approved. So we're going to be using carpets, and then their adhesives and the padding as well to be green approved. Those are all things that reduce toxicity, the VOC, the volatile organic compounds. You know, there's everything from kitchen cabinets to woodwork and so on. So we're stressing that big time. And both chapters do a pretty good job of that, and our scoring came out pretty well with that as well.
Isn't part of the air quality also with the sealing up of the buildings? I mean, when you have a super tight building, it's the air exchange.
The ventilation, there's whole building ventilation issues.
Right.
We have fans, we're going to have Energy Star exhaust fans.
Spray foam insulation.
The spray foam insulation. I mean, yes, ventilation is critical. We're talking about having a real tight whole building envelope here, right? Or else you're not going to pass Energy Star. In the same breath, you need to make sure the building is properly vented, and you do that with proper ventilation. There's mandates that clothes dryers must vent to the outside, okay? That bathroom fans must vent to the
I
outside.
think that's really, I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest things, the indoor air quality, and also going back to just reducing energy consumption is you make your building tight, you super insulate it,
Mhm.
and then you have an air quality, you're getting a different air quality, and even if you're using, you know, materials that aren't outgassing. So if you can tighten up your building, and then you just have to do an air exchange inside.
Exactly. That's your proper ventilation, and that's where a lot of builders don't quite get it, to be very honest.
Well, I think it's an opportunity that gets lost even
Yeah.
in most buildings, is to super insulate the building, just because long-term, you're gonna reduce your energy consumption, and that's really where you should go.
I spend a lot of time in my inspections and orientations up front with the builders. Okay, we've already talked a lot about this stuff.
And
In-
does the air ventilation also recapture heat from the waste air, you know, the outgoing air?
There are some systems that can do
Anxiety.
that, yes.
Because I know
Yes.
the Elting Library has that.
The heat exchanger.
Yeah.
There are heat exchange systems, there's heat recovery systems.
Yeah, to recover
Right.
the heated
Mold is
air.
also a big issue. There's key times when I have to go in and do inspections. Not just my inspections, but HERS Rater, who will be part of the contract, will be doing all the Energy Star inspections and all the testing, okay? So that person will be integrated into the project. It'll be, you know, a two-for, if you will. And I'll be looking at mold at rough inspection. Rough inspection means, for the green building, what I call post-insulation and pre-drywall. So all the insulation's got to be done to look, and I'm going to be able to see the studs, and I'm going to be looking for mold, you know, on the studs at that point. We're going to be looking for mold on the floor so that nothing's covered with visible mold, for one thing. Also, there's a hydrometer reading that the builder, basically, not the distributor of the product, bringing it to the saying, hey, it's below 19%. The builder buys a $40 hydrometer, plugs it into the wood, gives me some samples and numbers. Typically, good kiln-dried lumber is going to be no more than 12 or 13%, to be honest. So we way below those kind of numbers. So the VOC issue and the formaldehyde issues are huge. Indoor air quality, people spend a lot of time in the air, inside versus outside, and indoor air is usually more polluted than outdoor air. Okay? Even in larger metropolitan areas.
Will there be some kind of longer-term follow-up when the building is actually in use and being occupied by people?
There is no requirement under the Green Building Standard that there is follow-up after the certification. The homeowner maintenance manual is intended to be that, okay? So the property manager will have responsibilities on using the maintenance manual to basically make sure the building is properly maintained, all right? That's, the maintenance manual serves that purpose.
But all of this is to avoid having the sick building syndrome that you hear about now and then.
Exactly.
Where, like the state of Vermont had to tear down an entire
Yes,
building.
it's the indoor air quality issue. It's huge. I just can't, I was shocked in 2004 when we saw the results of that survey. And the last chapter is, in this case, we're talking tenants, so we're talking tenant and building management education. And there's a whole checklist of items to select from. You need to achieve X number to get to each level, you know, whether it's bronze, silver, gold, or emerald. All right, that's a very generic, those are the primary practices of any good National Green Building Standard. I appreciate your point on the mass transit. That's a quality issue that the practice points really do not address, okay? And really, you know, the environmental impact statement, you have to have discussions about the mass transit claims and how you're gonna handle that. That's that table. The actual scoring tools. You have one sheet summaries on both in the package, and essentially here's a quick summary. We'll go through them if you want in terms of points achieved. All mandates, all prerequisite mandatory practices have been met in both standards on the claim. Obviously, they must be verified during construction and at the end of construction by the verifier. Practice points. I think Eileen asked about, you know, what level we're talking about. We're talking silver. And the interesting thing here, we've got claims in exceeding the minimum points needed for green building level 2 silver. Both LEED and NGBS have silver as their second level. They vary with the names of the other levels, but on that one they're the same. The LEED claims 66 points, while LEED level 2 requires a minimum of 50 points. In other words, the claim by Wilmerite is greater than 30% over the silver level 2 minimum of LEED. Separately and apart, the NGBS claim of 530 points, while NGBS level 2 requires a minimum of 406 points. Again, and these were done totally separate, months apart, okay? He came out with a 30% above the silver level, a little greater than the 30% above the silver level 2 minimum. That's a real summary of the two scoring tools. You can see where they achieved on both, on the NGBS, the lot design, required points to get the silver, 66. Their claim is 151. On resource efficiency, 79, they claim 115. Energy efficiency, 60, they claim 101. Water, 26, 48 they claim. The indoor air quality, 65, they're claiming 99. And the operation, maintenance, and building owner education, you need 10, and they're claiming 16. All of that, the emphasis is verification. This is just their claim, okay? That's the important part. There used to be programs where the claim was it. That was it, and there was no third-party verification. That's all different today. LEED, different, it looks different, but essentially, if you match up the earlier table on the green building practices, the ID chapter is innovation and design processes. Possible points, 11. We're claiming 6. Location and linkages, possible points 10. We're claiming 5. Sustainable sites, possible points total of 25, we're claiming 12. The bottom line is on each one of these, and I'm reading that a little differently than the NGBS, because they're matched up differently. They have overachieved on every chapter in terms of getting to the silver level. I don't have my summary sheet on that, but.
So like on the second one, location and linkages, prerequisites, NA,
Mhm.
floor 0. So what's an example of that?
Location and linkages. Hang on one second, I'll try to tell you.
Assume it's probably the same as mass transit.
Location and linkages deals with lead for neighborhood development, site selection, edge or infill development, previously developed, infrastructure, existing infrastructure utilized, community resources, transit, access to open space.
So I would think no prereqs for water efficiency.
Huh? I don't know, you'd have to ask lead. I don't know. I don't know.
They have a requirement for single points.
They have possible points. They have a point floor of 3. You need to get 3. You need to get 3. We're basically claiming that 3. Possible points 15. Suffice it to say, if you look at the bar on the right, the gold bar, essentially it shows what they've achieved. And they've gotten, I know they needed at least 50 points if I'm not mistaken, and the claim is for 66 across the board. I think they've done extremely well. Again, it's all claim-based. Materials and resources. That's the durability, sustainability issue. You want these buildings standing for a while, I think, you know, better than the typical, and they will because of the point structure we were talking about here.
Is there any difference in lead for homes versus lead for commercial buildings?
Yes. Yes, big time.
So
You're getting into
how would
steel
this-
construction.
So how would this look?
Since I don't do lead commercial, I can't tell you. NGBS only had.
Who input these numbers into this?
We did as a team. We did as a team. Lead for homes, specifically lead for residential, okay? NGBS only has residential. NGBS, we couldn't do a comparison of lead commercial, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, to compare to what? NGBS doesn't work in the commercial world. We can do mixed use as long as there's residential, but ours is, the NGBS is a residential standard, period. So you can't do a comparison between the two. There is no comparison.
Lead does neighborhood development, they do adaptive reuse, so they have it broken down by different categories.
They have 5 or 6 different standards, totally separate from each other. NGBS, excuse me, Jim. NGBS does have a land development chapter separate with a separate certification, okay? And I don't know if that's their attempt to address what the land development is for.
So do you feel there's no like relevant application for lead for this type of project?
No, I didn't say that.
Lead for homes would be the-
Lead for homes is.
Lead for homes, so like when the college builds a dorm, they use the lead for homes standard?
No, how you lead commercial,
Because there's steel structure, it's a
Yeah.
different style.
We're talking 2 stories here, you know?
3 stories.
3 stories?
Wood frame.
Wood
Yeah.
frame.
That's the big difference, is the wood frame structure.
Why is it different?
Steel.
I know, but what's the,
Lot.
how do the systems treat those 2 systems? How do they treat it differently?
He's not really an expert.
I'm not an expert in that. I'm not a design professional.
We
so.
really, we've been coming obviously to these public hearings for a couple of months and hearing people mention lead over and over. And we went through the lead exercise really to try to do a comparison and try to help answer and come back with some answers to some concerns that maybe we weren't following a valid standard. We just tried to sit down over the last month and say, all right, well, we're not following lead because we feel that our standard really is a better green standard for building this type of a structure.
Yeah,
But
I
we'll
understand
take that and just, we'll do our best to at least compare the two for you and go through the exercise.
But I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that the public is just pulling this lead interest out of nowhere. This is
I
also
don't
a
say that
requirement
either.
by the state of New York and if the colleges.
Campuses, right.
For
Mhm.
campuses, so I mean, I think that's what they're referring to, they're not merely
State of New York
referring to-
policy, I can
So
address
they're not
that.
merely referring to the policy that they're.
I can address the New York State policy because I was the CEO of the New York State Builders Association, and we have a lobbying arm. Not that anymore, it's been 2.5 years since I've been there, but that's right around the time when they started mandating LEED commercial on public facilities in New York with the presumption they were commercial facilities, not residential, okay? So the Dorm Authority, SUNY, OGS, prisons, any public facility that has state funding, okay, specifically, must be LEED, but there's a presumption, and if you read all the policy statements and the chapter information that went with that chapter that mandated that, it really talks about institutions and commercial facilities, not residential, especially a stick-built structure. So that's where we're at. I mean, it's a stick-built structure. I have other clients that are doing that.
This still doesn't answer your question, though. I feel like you're still in question. I think what we've been trying to do is create this comparison between the two programs and show how we scored against each and why we're using another. We've always been using NGBS from get-go, really, because as said many times, Bruce has been involved in it, extensively. So we've been using it. We are aware that there is a requirement on campus that they build any new structure LEED Silver. And this was an attempt to show you that the program that we're using is also recognized by NYSERDA and just as qualified as LEED, and that we are scoring to almost the exact, surpass the silver requirement. So if we were to take a LEED path, use LEED for homes for this, we feel very comfortable that we'd be closer to LEED Gold than LEED Silver.
Right, but I think the distinctions, and I think you're showing that, and the Cincinnati study says that. I think what we'd be looking for, though, because you're developing a campus and you're trying to integrate this as a neighborhood adjacent to a campus, so a neighborhood next to a neighborhood, basically. So to me, you should look at it as like neighborhood design, because it's not just looking at individual buildings and do these individual buildings. Individual buildings are important, the air quality, all of the metrics that you said, those are all important, but you gotta look at the whole package. You gotta look at the overall design and not just individual buildings, like taking lead and saying, no, wait, it's taking lead and going, this is gonna be a LEED Silver building, when you miss the design.
Well, we're not.
Right.
In my verification, when I stress the importance of site inspections, I will walk and I will see those connectivities. I have similar projects. I have other projects where they're building Project B. Project A was built 5 years ago, and there's a little bit of woods in between the two. What's the connectivity between the two? Okay? That's all part of my, the tools I have to use as a verifier, the protocol I have to follow as an inspector.
Well, but it has to be designed that way for you to inspect it after the fact.
But that's what we've been doing all along.
Yeah, but
that's what we've been doing from day one.
Right.
This site design, from site design. Site design was started before we, Wilmer, even became involved in this project. There was a couple different versions of this site plan.
I remember seeing a couple, I guess, going back to some of the things we talked about the last meeting, I think your design needs work. I understand how you laid it out, and I understand some of the comments today that said pull it up to the street, which would have been my comment originally if there weren't wetlands up there. There's sensitive wetlands, and I understand all of that.
Minimizing.
But I think there's other design things that you can do in there to make it,
there's a 100-foot buffer here that we are
pull it into the other, into the campus to make it tighter to the campus and make it that people want to bike in and want to use that site and not use cars. I mean, you can do it. You can do it. I think you can.
Can we just get back to the, what we were talking about is site design and the very beginning, avoidance, minimizing, and I think we've accomplished that considerably because this is probably the 10th design that I've seen on this site.
You have a difficult site. You did a very good job laying it out in terms of all the environmental constraints, and you're dictated a certain orientation. Understood. I think there's more you can do.
But there's code requirements that we're trying to get variances on to try to reduce impact, reduce footprint, increase density.
I'm just, you know what, we can go back and forth, but I just wanted to say that I think there's more you can do, and I've said that before,
Okay.
you know, that's,
Okay, let's-
really, I don't wanna go back and forth with you on it.
But back to the point, I think was
Yeah.
what we were here today to try to achieve was, this has been talked about, so many times about LEED versus NGBS. And what we wanted to do was share with you what our results were as we scored the project as it is under both programs. And we feel as a team that we've been extremely successful in providing a very thorough analysis of your specific request, which is an extremely difficult task to compare these two. As you can see, that produce this, and that took years and a lot of people's input to create, and none of them are exact either. And all these projects change. So.
Hey, Tom, I'm imagining that my question is probably a question for the college again and not for you guys, but I'm curious if let's say, as the representative from the college who spoke first at the public hearing, he was talking about the college has reached debt ceilings as far as like what they can build as far as dormitories, and the state is not issuing money for colleges to build dorms. Let's say there was the money available to build dorms, would the college be permitted to build stick frame 3-story structures as dorms? So why have they not done that in the past? Because my understanding is that this type of architecture is definitely less expensive to construct than a steel frame building.
It comes down to their philosophy about how long these buildings should last, what they think an institutional building is, what they think is go to in terms of dollars. I mean,
The area too, just a lot of area, because if you're gonna be doing 2-story buildings, you need a lot more space.
well, but I mean,
3-story.
Disney's built, the dormitory authority has built wood frame buildings, and they built steel frame buildings or concrete buildings.
I guess if you wanna go to 4 stories.
Well, but you can do it,
Yeah.
you can do 2-story.
Well,
Now,
if your goal is a 4-story building,
You
on
can
site,
still,
you can still do wood, but
Yeah.
the wood gets,
Four is your maximum for wood.
4 would be,
You don't want to be going above
I mean, the difference
As long as you have
between
an elevator.
the LEED for homes issue and the LEED issue is really about common elements. So if you're building a dormitory and you have like common kitchen facility, like a cafeteria kind of thing, you're gonna go into LEED, what is it?
It's really a commercial structure.
Right, exactly.
First of all, they wouldn't qualify
But if the college
under
was building
NGBS.
apartments like this, it would go LEED for homes, because LEED won't let you certify a building like this under anything other than LEED for homes.
And NGBS won't certify dorm rooms.
But if you're building a traditional dormitory with common facilities, like common lawns and common cafeterias, then you can go LEED.
So we're talking about a whole housing unit with all components of a house, essentially.
So they're gonna pursue a LEED for home standard when they construct the dorm that's planned by the gym?
I do not know.
I have no idea.
it'd be lead silver, but it wouldn't be.
I doubt it. If they're dormitory room, are they apartments? Are they apartments?
We're doing a project.
No, dorms.
Then it's not gonna work with LEED for homes either.
We're doing a project right now for C.
No, it'd be commercial.
On
LEED
campus.
On campus.
Dormitory.
Dormitory authority, LEED for homes. So, I mean, and that's the path you have to go. You have no choice, it's apartments.
Have to. Read it again. I don't-
Dormitory, a typical dorm is like a hotel.
So what is the point though? What are you trying to get at?
I'm just trying to understand.
Okay, okay. I
Yeah,
wasn't
fair
sure
enough.
what you were-
Those are good questions.
Okay.
It is confusing.
Well,
What would you like to look at next?
I really wanna look at the interconnections. What
Okay.
are we talking about?
So the interconnection is really, the one interconnection is on the northwest corner of the property, and I have a couple pictures.
This is the actual,
You need another one of those?
our property.
No, I've got plenty, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay, this is where our property connects.
right.
Do you have one of these?
There should be a couple there.
So here, in the grand scheme of your comparison to the lot, this is where you're looking, right here, this connection, interconnection on the north.
This
Yes,
is this?
is this, correct. This is this. Maybe we should have highlight a larger map. But we're looking at this section here, what the university has to do. And
this
Don,
is the orientation.
Don and Shelley are here from college. They could speak more to this a little bit, as their departments put this together. We're going to mimic their path here, as it connects to our property. There will be a drive, you know, a two-way drive through here. And there'll be one road crossing right here.
I just don't know.
This
where
is
we
the
are.
orientation right here.
Which
This is
way is
laid out
north?
same way. It comes in here, this is this, then this
North
goes this
is
way.
above.
This is this building.
There it is.
Where's Route
This-
32?
Up here,
It's not,
right
it's not right
here.
here.
Down
This
here.
is Route 32 right here.
Okay,
That's Route 32.
okay.
Our property ends right here.
Two is out here.
Okay, so our property
It's okay.
butts into
So
the
this is
college.
Park Point.
Yeah, this is Park Point and this is.
See how that's,
This is the college.
connection right here.
This is what we're looking at right
So
there.
the campus is up here.
Campus up here.
This is the south side.
You wanna see that?
South side loop, correct.
These are the bigger picture.
All right, well, yeah, I've
That's
got,
the heating plant.
brought my own map.
Okay.
Thank you.
Comes in.
From our. That's the heating plant right here.
That's a heater.
That's the heating plant.
Right,
That's
that's
the
not-
heating plant. This is classroom space. This is classroom space.
This is classroom now? Done.
Don, I think it is, right, Don? Classroom space? This is classroom space,
Yeah,
correct?
that's the South Classroom Building.
Okay.
It's a modular building.
So exists a one-way loop around this building. They're gonna create this connection, this road right in here. They're gonna remove these existing buildings that are shown on the property. They're getting rid of all this and moving it down, I think, where there are some other buildings, correct? They'll create a one-way in and out right here off of South Loop. And it'll connect with an existing pathway right here across South Loop. This already connects, it's actually a little bit right here, you can see where it is. They're gonna relocate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a foot and bike path that is the same as their, I forget what the level of connection you guys call that on campus, but the type of pathway that it is.
And what was
Part of
the,
that's in existence. now,
why you
isn't
couldn't
it?
do that?
No, it's not. That's not.
And not, and
it's up
minimize
above that.
crossing because this is too steep
Because this is
over here?
it
Oh,
does
there's
get
a
steep
building
right here,
here?
and this is an existing building that is used for, I think it's administrative space.
It's a temporary faculty office building.
Okay. But there is ultimately a crossing here as well, back into their, some of their facilities.
There is a facility back
And
there.
grounds, they
As
they
far
park,
as over-
yeah.
So this rain garden thing at the end is gonna be essentially paved over.
Where are you?
I'm looking at the original plan. It has a thing with lots of dots, which if you go by the plant key, it looks sort of like some sort of rain garden.
I think it's just stormwater management.
Well, even that's more of an issue if it's stormwater management. Is it gonna manage the stormwater if there's a road and a sidewalk through it?
I'm not Bruce Bonke, so I don't know the answer to that. But I would imagine it's not gonna have a negative impact on our water management plan.
Increase the lot size.
Well, this
Alright.
little
So
section here,
this is where the
whatever
connection
this
is,
thing is.
from our
We got
property north, and then this is right here.
Can I dig it deeper?
This pedestrian and bicycle path across the south side right at Hasbrook Dining Hall, which we think will be handy. This will give students and faculty and staff access to the athletic and wellness center, and either of these paths leads pretty directly to the academic part of the campus.
So this is, you said this was a classroom, this one?
It's
And
the
what's
only
over here on this side?
Well, right now there are several satellite dishes that are defunct. They're no longer used. Those will be removed. You may have read that recently we installed solar panels to charge our electric vehicles. Those are located here. They'll be relocated. So we expect an investment for this.
That's part of the long term of moving all the
And
stuff
part of-
off here.
Yeah, and part of
Right,
this too.
you're basically moving all your maintenance equipment, except for the steam plant.
Except for the plant and the
Out.
long-term master
In
plan.
the long plan, it's moving out, so you're just starting where you can.
That's right.
Including these three buildings
Right.
that would be removed.
In the letter that I wrote to you, I mentioned parking as near as I could on campus to Park Point, and this was an 8-minute walk from that parking spot right there to my office in the administration building. So I'm estimating a 15-minute walk for people from Park Point.
From the farthest regions, yeah.
What's the distance of that?
What's the distance in miles?
I don't know that, I don't know if I can tell you the distance. Our sustainability committee is undertaking an exercise
It's less than a
at
mile.
GIS
Three-quarters of a
mapping
mile.
distances from
It's
parking
right.
lots to
Yeah.
various buildings. I'm sure it's less than a mile.
And a
Oh,
walk.
yeah.
Walk a mile in 20 minutes, so,
Yeah,
so 15, probably 3/4 of a
let's
mile.
walk fast.
Can we keep these?
I don't know,
I can
20
do
minutes,
that.
20 minutes is not that fast.
Do you want this, Mike?
We have extras.
Oh, you have extra ones? Okay.
You know,
So I'll go look at it.
only one other,
Yeah, they're really just
one other
storage
question
sheds.
I got
It's
for you,
actually-
Don,
it's an
is
open barn. This is a storage
sidewalk
shed.
on
They just-
32.
They actually have like dumpsters in it.
the campus sidewalk stops at South Side, and there's a stretch to the end of your property that has no sidewalk going further south. We're trying to get them to build a sidewalk going north along 32. So all I'm looking for is if the college would can undertake the look of a sidewalk on 32.
I haven't heard any conversation at all about that. I guess I would, my preference is to think about getting students from, and faculty and staff from Park Point onto the campus, and having them get on a sidewalk along Highway 32 seems like a pretty indirect route to do that.
They might want to go someplace else,
Oh,
though,
they
than
might want to go
the
into town,
campus.
yeah.
Yeah, without going through college. And I mean, you've got a sidewalk already to south side. You got a sidewalk along 32 already, down to there.
But does Park Point have a sidewalk along
Yes.
Highway 32?
Yes.
They will have
Yeah.
a sidewalk along
Yeah,
32.
you just need to
Then it's
connect
silly
it.
not to connect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not big, but it just,
Yeah.
I'm always for building sidewalks and connecting them where I have the possibility of doing that. And that would be one of the things I would want to see continued. Well, this looks a lot cleaner and kind of response to the question of the interconnection. I mean, from our point, it's a safety issue of, okay, we have the students, we can get them off your property, how do they safely get to class? And I think you've laid out a methodology to address this and to get there at it.
Hey, Jared.
That looks-
Tom had a question. On the pedestrian walkway here, is there lighting?
Yeah. It has to be lighted, yeah. Yeah, it'll
But
meet
it
the-
can
the,
be.
Standard that university does. And we have light as well in our. Yeah.
Is there a difference with, like, it seems like some of the lights on campus become brighter as you...
Yeah, they're changing their lighting plan,
It's
they're
LED.
installing LEDs that are motion sensitive.
So
Yeah.
that's what any of the lights...
I would admit, I don't know their exact spec for this.
They're also downward, part of.
Dark sky compliant.
Dark sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, light pollution.
And the other,
Like-
one of
like
the other points that I
trespass.
asked a bunch of times was on their master plan, what was proposed for this area. The furthest they show out is, this is a really small, I'm sorry, this is just their master plan. But this is the area, this is where Park Point is proposed, this is that area. This is where facilities will be relocated to, down there. The only structure you see in the area, which with the direct connection here now, is just recreation fields, and they keep the plant, and that's the only thing. So long-term, as furthest as they've gone out, they don't show any structures or buildings being developed here. I think you'd asked that, Mike, specifically that you saw this being prime real estate on Route 32. and you-
Well, again, they got the ability to.
So in other words, where SUNY Police is, where the repair shop is,
Yes.
they're all gonna be moved?
Long-term.
Long-term, that's part of the long-term 25-year plan on this one right here. I mean, that's not part of what we're, but it was asked, and I just wanted to make sure it was addressed. This is their long-term master plan and their landscape plan. And we'll obviously include this in the, final.
There's a different landscape plan than this. What year is this? Is this Aaron Kurtz? Oh, this is it, okay, yep. I was gonna say, I don't recognize this cover.
All right.
I guess the email that we received from the Cincinnati plan, for the Cincinnati comparison, they were talking about the amount of $1 that would go I think it was like 80 cents goes to the building for lead, 90 cents for NGBS. I'm curious, is that, you know, is that what you're anticipating in terms of like how much of a dollar would go towards building in this, with this project? And then also, when you constructed Park Point RIT, how much of the dollar went towards, I imagine, I guess 100 cents of the dollar went towards the building. And how much would this project, what would the difference in terms of construction costs be if you use the standards for RIT versus if you use the NGBS standards? Maybe you can just give me a percentage.
I don't have a clue, I don't have an answer, I've never even approached or tried to calculate it like that.
I mean, you must have a sense of how much additional this will cost to pursue NGBS standards versus conventional standards that you would have used at RIT.
Right, you mean, you're talking, not at RIT, you're talking about just as a current zoning project, what, if current zoning.
No,
I think
RIT.
he means that RIT didn't employ.
Are you talking
any-
about soft
right,
costs or hard costs?
right.
I'm talking about hard costs.
Hard construction costs.
Yeah, but the zoning lines are different, the site development is different, There's so many differences between the two projects. They're both student housing, but that's really the only thing. So
But
it's very difficult to do
I don't think you were required to, you know, have any green standards for RIT. So let's say you could.
But that doesn't mean we didn't do, we had,
I'm not
because.
saying you didn't. So
Well, that's right, he's gonna
the
have a hard
question-
comparison, say, go ahead, finish
No,
up.
the question I have is, so if you didn't have, I mean, yes, you might choose to pursue some of your own green standards because it makes sense because you're going to be paying for utilities anyways. So I want to know what would the difference be if you were to pursue that type of cost to build something versus now adding this additional NGBS layer.
On the hard cost only side, meaning.
Sure, just anything, just to, I want
Is
to.
it 10%
I want to
more, or is it,
understand the
yeah,
difference.
20% more, 15?
Think about it, you have to come up with
Yeah,
top of it.
Yeah.
it's tough,
It's
because
tough,
how we would build it, we wouldn't build to the minimum standards no matter what. We could
Right,
use
but-
2x4 construction instead of 2x6. You know, there's a lot of things that we could do at a minimum to build the structure. So where you start your comparison's difficult too.
I gave you the baseline, Park Point RIT, that's the baseline.
But that's not.
But then
that's
do
not
we
a different
strip out
project
our
than
green
this.
initiatives for that?
Because we've done
I mean,
things
because
there.
we
spent-
have thermal wells all over the place there,
geothermal
because that,
RIT.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it
Right,
made
so-
sense there.
But what I'm assuming here is that you're doing something to a greener standard than you did at RIT.
I
No.
don't
To some-
necessarily
to
know
some-
that because we
some
didn't
degree.
necessarily
Yeah.
score that, but, you know, I think today we would be at LEED or NGBS Silver as RIT is designed and operated right now. So, I mean, if we were to go back and certify that, but I don't know how you would compare it directly, you being the architect, you being the actual builder.
You could try and score it, I mean.
We would
you
have
could
to go
back
back
and
from the
try
very
and
beginning and
score
actually
the
score it two
design.
different ways. Score it, one as a plain construction project built to code, and then add on to all that, all the things we did do as we would get points for in LEED or NGBS, and score it two different ways, and then do a cost analysis on what those additional costs were. That's to start at RIT, and then come up with a figure, and then compare it to what we're allowed to, what, you know, code requirement is here in New Falls, and then what we're doing additionally to get to NGBS or LEED Silver, which isn't, or maybe Energy Star, we do say what we have to do to get to Energy Star.
No, there's really three things to look at that I always look at as a verifier. First of all, New York's building and energy conservation codes are some of the most aggressive codes in the country, all right? So the NGBS and LEED are national standards, right? So they're looking at these standards and how they're going to fit in Kentucky construction versus New York construction. Totally different ballgame. I will tell you that in Kentucky, I have some clients in other states, and they're looking for help to get to bronze, okay? Or certified if it's LEED. They're looking for help because they can't get there because their codes aren't there. We're in a state that has an aggressive code system. I also basically work with builders who are already building beyond our codes. These guys for one, and others. If a guy's just building a code house, frankly, I'm not interested because it's gonna be a bigger challenge to get to the green certification level you wanna get to. So you have code, and New York's code is higher than most states. Then you have what the builder's practices are, which the ones I'm working with are always above code anyway. And then you have those who are trying to achieve third-party verified green building standard at any level. There's really 3 different levels. I will tell you that I think a lot of the things, when we went through these scoring tools, and we spent hours, I mean, we're talking several hours on each one of these. I asked challenging questions because I need to make sure if we're putting a claim down, you want a claim to be nice and tight to make sure that when I go in, not to make sure, but to hope that the claim jives with the actual verification, okay? And I think these claims are pretty tight. We'll find out, obviously. But there's different standards. And
I get
and
that.
our IT, they do better than code. But what we found in the scoring tool is, and Jim was really the guy answering yes or no, because they're already doing some of these things. That's the good thing.
I mean, maybe I should just take a step back and try to explain why I'm asking these questions. I'm asking these questions not so much to make you guys jump through like challenging analysis. I'm asking these questions because I feel like the community is concerned and they'd like to understand exactly, and I appreciate the fact that I feel like we've asked several times for some sort of matrix, some sort of discussion, and I think you're coming to us with a very reasonable first step as far as helping us get comfortable with LEED versus NGBS. So when I'm saying like, give me some numbers, give me some simple explanations, I think that's very useful for our community, for the college students. It would be very useful for us as a board. I mean, it's not to like make you jump through like hoops that are on fire just because I think it's funny. Like I think it's actually useful.
I think, let me just throw something out on it. I think to get a feeling of where we are on energy efficiency, that maybe we can talk about greed, we can talk about leads, but somewhere along the line, for people to relate to it, what are some of the, I'll call it the energy efficiency improvements that one is putting in the building? To the extent that you're putting in, low flush toilets,
That's not an energy, that's a water.
Well, I'm talking about over and above what's code requirement type of thing.
There's
What
a
am I
higher
doing?
value for the roof and the siding
And
and
to
things
give
like
them a
that.
feel of what's going up over and above what is code requirement that's going in on it is more related to people who do things in their houses and know what they mean on it. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just missing it too. Whether getting $1 that says we're paying another 15% of energy efficiency or improvements in the buildings over and above the code requirements for it is something people can grasp on.
That's what I'm looking for, is something that people can grasp
And
on.
I'm-
It's like we've talked ad nauseum about this idea that LEED is marketed better. And you guys are frustrated because most people are more familiar with LEED. So
But they don't know what LEED is. They don't know the
precisely,
word.
they don't know what it is, but they think that it's good. So what I'm looking for is something tangible that we can then get comfortable with ourselves, that we can share with the community, instead of just saying, well, we think it's better because
You can do it a
Wilmerite
different way.
consultant.
Instead of doing it from $1 you can do it then, as Mike said, more from an energy efficiency. You're putting on an R value of R45 and it's 30% greater, 20% greater than what we need to put on there.
Well,
That might be easier.
part of the performance path that we will take
That might be easier.
is going to give you those exact measurements.
People will
The HERC,
Yeah,
the
so
HERC
you
certificate,
understand it,
the HERC certificate that has to be issued as part of this program for both Green and Energy Star.
I'd be happy to go back and take a look at this. I can't answer you right now, but within a week, all I need to do is go back, look at line for line our estimate, and I can come up with some numbers for you. I'll be happy to do that. I just can't answer it on the spot. I can tell you, for example, spray foam insulation is at least 70 cents more a square foot for every wall that you spray the foam in. That helps with your mold issue because it changes your moisture points in your building envelope. It certainly helps with your building tightness, and it also helps with your structure. You get 3 bangs for the buck, and it's almost $1 a square foot. It's a lot of money, if I go through that for every line item, I can come up with some type of a percent for you, but I'd hate to throw out a number.
No, we don't want,
I may be misunderstanding, but maybe I don't. What I think he wants is something that the public can grasp, that you're going above and beyond of the lead or
So maybe,
whatever it is.
so maybe it's not necessarily just a dollar amount, maybe it's just our green list, the things that we are doing that are above code, that is just, that the layperson, not Phil or the lead guy over here can understand or can talk about, that you understand, but, you know, we're doing completely 100% LED lighting for the entire
99%.
project. 99%.
We have one light that's not LED.
Yeah,
I'm like,
we're doing 99%. We're doing spray foam insulation. You know, we're using fully recycled material on the exterior walls. I mean, all those types of things are that you say that the community will be more interested in understanding, be more something that they could, you know, translate into. Okay, they are doing more
green items.
But doesn't, so my checklist, our checklist here in our scoring tool doesn't necessarily mean anything to anybody else. You've asked us what are we qualified to? We're NGBS silver, we're LEED silver, whichever program we apply for. But what are of silver? What are those components that we're actually doing in the project? I think
that would be very useful.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know that it's frustrating and you feel like we're asking, you know, asking for a tall order, but like I think to Eileen's point is like someone might respond better to if you said, well, the R value of this building is.
Well, you're
is
going to a different. I'm going to that. And you're going
and
to.
I'd like to know just like, you know, how much does it, how much you're spending on building versus, you know, the green initiative, you know, just concrete things. It's kind of like helping you like market your project and getting
well,
people
why
feel
don't
comfortable.
you take a look at it? I think we got a couple of different approaches on it.
Okay.
See what kind of works, and let's bounce it back and see if we got an answer. And
a combination of both.
Yeah. There were 3 things that you wanted to do.
I'm
Yeah,
lost
no,
now.
no.
Oh yeah, parking and
Parking.
Park banking. And I just wanted to, I could put it on this big map.
Yeah,
Yeah, put it on a big.
you can see it.
So, you know, we're trying to respond to everything in every meeting. The things that we wanted to see was, you know, what is the parking required? We've always shown it over here in this chart, in this table over here.
Yeah.
I think required parking is 505 parking spaces, maybe 530 some odd parking spaces. Of that is 300, what we're proposing is 305 surface spaces. That's for the residential area. 32 of those are for the clubhouse. We are proposing that we bank 200 and I think it says 96. I can't read that small on my mind.
236.
236. So we're proposing that we bank.
Everything in
Everything
purple.
in purple is what represents a bank parking that we will not pave. We will just, we just won't pave it. And that provides, I think, 44% park banking for what is required by code. Required by code
This is based, and again, I'd like this, you know, when you're writing and justifying it, this
Yes.
is based on our experience at, you know, similar situations about the amount of parking that we need.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is what we need to service the residents, that we feel we need to service the residents on the property. What is shown in total is what's required by code.
And then what's shown in purple
Actually,
is.
I think we're parking. I don't know. We're parking less than. We're showing less than what code is.
Well,
This one's in the wetlands. Like this one, you're cutting into a wetlands area right here. Is that not? Right in here? I mean, you don't have it identified.
No, I think that's part of the buffer. Part of the.
100-foot buffer.
100-foot buffer. Which right now is only a 50-foot buffer.
Wait, where is the buffer? The dotted line?
I think it's the dotted line.
What's that?
Well, this is wetland
Well,
here.
we're not building it.
But we're not building in that, so.
No, but the parking,
But the land
it's
bank
not,
and the
yeah, it's
wetlands.
not a viable spot.
Well, we're not gonna build it.
But you wouldn't be allowed to.
Under the.
Well, even under the other plan, it doesn't show
You don't want us to, though.
as.
No, I think
It's
this
also
is,
part of.
At all,
I think
They show it.
you weren't
sort of
paving there.
dark.
Right.
Right.
We're just using the purple as a
So is
visual,
this.
saying it will
It's a
stay
visual.
green.
It's not
Yeah,
a
this
change.
was,
They've added some here.
A road back here.
But no, I think
It
this was,
wasn't parking.
there's a road in there, and this was to be parked, and this was okay with
And they've
Spire.
added
Yes.
This is shown in our,
That's
our site
true, I
plan
see that.
as parked, and this is okay by, and it's in his recommendation.
Because
that
it's
this
an
was less
ordinary wetland,
sensitive-
is that
This
why?
is a less sensitive area, opposed to right down in here, where we have all this open space.
Well, that, yeah, forget it.
But we can't
But
put-
this
don't
is
forget
steep here,
that. We-
though. No, I meant that's so far out, too, you're not gonna park there.
I understand, but
Yeah.
my point is, by not utilizing any access back into here to park, I mean, all this space back here is usable, and we can, but this goes back to the original study.
I'd rather see you park back there.
Okay, well, your environmental.
We're
wet-
not- we're never-
would
we're
say-
not quite- no.
Park on the furthest
Okay.
west part and.
No, yeah, no,
So,
gonna happen. Nothing
so
there.
because we're not
But
doing
that's
that
in the
back
buffer.
here, Spider
That's
said this is
where the
not
antifreeze
as
stuff
sensitive.
is gonna
This
drip.
is fine. You can park right here. Yes, we encroach on the 50 or the 100-foot buffer, but that's fine because this is not as sensitive as this, and as important as this, or up here, or over here.
It's important to remember that it's not in the wetlands.
Yeah, nothing's in the wetlands. And again, back to,
There's the encroachment on the buffer.
it's the encroachment, and is what Spider Barber directed us to do.
Okay, well, yeah, you're just showing this to us, so I wanna look at that then.
Okay.
Because you know what, you don't have all the, I wanna look at like the slopes and the information that's presented here. This, I mean, this is
Yeah,
good.
it's sloping,
This is
there'd be
helpful.
a retaining
This is
wall here
helpful,
to,
though.
Well, yeah, if we were to build here, we would have to
Just
build the
drain those
slope up too,
ponds
and we'd
built
probably
there.
put a retaining wall in order to get that parking in there.
That would probably be the last
Ben,
place we
you're
would.
not
Probably.
probably the last place we want, so. I think we're trying to identify areas where,
Further than that, we've identified some shared parking spaces where, car sharing will be allowed or designated only for, shared car parking.
Now hurts, right?
hurts.
Yeah.
it's what, it's their.
We
program.
also, up this yellow, which is on here, and I don't think we've really talked about it a lot, will be electric car charging stations to encourage electric cars. Be designated solely for those.
Would you pay to get
You would, yeah, I mean, they just basically.
Like buying gas.
Credit card, it's like
Yeah.
buying gas, yeah.
A lot cheaper.
So you put in your credit
Tech-
card and charge.
Yeah.
Technically, you
Yeah.
charge for the time.
So ultimately, what we wanted to illustrate here is where exactly the park banking is and what the percentages of park banking to what's required by code. And it's
So,
almost half. We're shaving about half off.
Well, it's one of the big issues that kept coming up. So, you know, every time someone said, you got too much parking, I felt like, saying, well, that's what our code requires. It wasn't anything that they were putting in
Again,
extra parking.
And since our last meeting, we had a follow-up meeting with the ZBA about that issue, and, you know, Linda, the direction was that, you need to park this as per code, but I think parking is a viable, solution to a lot of problems and to reduce it, so, but they wanna see an application that shows the parking that's required. So that's why we're showing it, that's why we're showing to you the opportunity to bank parking as well.
You did meet with the zoning board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The one thing I would say on this is what triggers paving it. How do we analyze this going forward on an ongoing basis?
We have to, for stormwater purposes, Dave, we have to analyze it as it is paid.
Well, no, I agree with that, okay? And that wasn't, the issue I come back with is what triggers I wanna pave it because I need the parking.
Building inspector's determination.
And well, that's what
Parking is necessary.
statement to that effect, that, we have to come forward on that.
He said, what Mike's saying is, what happens if later,
2 years down
You
the
have-
road.
you have cars
We got
parking on the
cars
grass.
parking on
You know,
32
what
because
do
there's
you
no
do?
room in there.
Right.
What do we trigger, who triggers that to get done?
Yep.
And that's what I was just trying to get at. Okay. Again, it just closes the loop on
I have a question related to parking and traffic. I mean, I brought this up before. I feel it's like maybe my naive attempt at policy, and maybe we could get a response from the president. Just like, how doable is it to have policy that would kind of be a game changer and be very helpful for the college and the community in terms of getting comfortable with parking and traffic, where if you change policy where freshmen are not allowed to drive or have cars, why not change it so it's freshman and sophomore? That's a policy change that I think would be a significant game changer that the community would be very supportive of and be able to say this is going to make us feel more comfortable about the potential for added traffic, because I think the jury's out as to whether this thing is is going to add traffic on Friday afternoons, because the parking study only looked at Wednesdays and Thursdays, or the traffic study. Is that something that you can kind of take back and?
Well, a couple things I'd say. One, certainly we have a parking committee that evaluates and makes recommendations on all these matters to us, and it's certainly something we could look at. We are implementing a long-term policy of moving parking to the perimeter of the campus. And as I wrote in the letter that I don't know whether you've seen or not.
Yeah, I've sent it.
I believe we're approaching the sort of situation where a student living at Park Point is not going to benefit distance-wise driving to one of the existing parking lots, because they're going to be just as far from their classrooms as walking or biking from Park Point. One of the immediate questions that I would want to evaluate as we think about perhaps extending a ban on cars on campus for sophomore students is that we're trying to develop more and more programs of student internships, community learning and community engagement, and many students are undertaking those exercises at the sophomore level. And so there's a transportation need to accomplish those educational goals. Certainly something we can look at, but it's not an easy equation to just respond to right now.
But that's where the car sharing comes in, because that's a big savings for somebody not to own the car, but where you have a car sharing program. And if you pushed that, that's, I think it was an $8,000 savings per year. I think something just came out last year on if you did a car sharing versus owning a car. It's a tremendous difference. And if that could be something like that, sold, or I called it maybe incorrectly a bike sharing. Some of the campuses actually at the beginning of the year you can lease out a bike. You put your credit card down, you get a bike for the semester, and they're going to have.
I spoke with the bike shop; they don't like that idea.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I can understand.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah. All right, I mean, we can draft a letter and send it off to the college and ask them to put it into the committee that you have working on it. Tell them to evaluate it and see what the pros and cons are, and go forward from there.
That's what I mean, not sharing. No, not sharing.
The bike shop doesn't. They make sell bike for $350, but they lease it for $100 for the semester. It's going to come out. I went over it.
Okay. What else we got?
I just want to clarify one point on the energy efficiency. There are, in the EIS, various energy efficiency techniques such as geothermal heat that are described as something that will be considered if practical. When you did the scoring, did you count things like that? Did you discount things?
I don't believe we put a claim in for geothermal.
Well,
No.
but for things that are described as practical.
One thing that I was.
I'd have to go back to the 14 pages.
One thing that I was very tough on is I didn't want to commit to anything unless we already pretty much had it 100% in design.
Okay.
There's some items, there's a maybe column actually
saw that
in there.
maybe.
On lead.
Which, on lead,
On lead.
we don't get one of those on NGBS, but on lead there is a maybe. So if it bounced back and forth long enough, we say, just throw it in maybe. But that maybe doesn't account towards that silver. There's actually two bars. There's
Right.
a
Yeah,
bar
we saw
that
that.
gets
Maybe
you in
doesn't
silver,
count. You don't
and then
get
there's
points
a
for that.
further if we actually did all those maybes,
Right.
and we maybe will do them. We have no idea at this
Right.
point. So that we tried to be very conservative. on it.
Very, very cautious.
Okay.
That's the only way to do it, to be safe.
You had one other?
Oh, I'm good. Are you?
Yeah, we're dead. I've been up too long. I feel like you do.
Anything else, Dave, on your end? Sure.
One little thing about the parking, and it might have come up and I
Go ahead.
missed it. But is a parking
Good night.
place considered included in your rent if you're living there? Or do you have to pay extra for a parking
No,
place?
we discussed that, and based on all the comments about charging extra for parking, we agreed that we would look into that.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be included in rent,
It wouldn't?
no. It- it
We
was-
will charge a
it-
fee
it
for
was
parking, an additional fee. for
Several
Uh-huh,
times
right.
I
it
think
came
that
up.
would make Tim very happy.
And so that might also affect the number of parking places you might
Which
require.
is a simple thing for us to do because everyone needs a parking pass anyway, so it'd just be a charge for the actual pass.
Mhm.
Quick question for the college. Students that live here, they pay a student activities fee
Yes.
that includes, you know, the loop bus and things of that sort? Okay. I thought so, but I just need verification. I got enough bobbing heads to know that. I appreciate
Yep,
it.
yep.
Right there, is that a rotary? Is
That's a
that
rotary.
there's something that's a center into it?
Yeah, that's just a
Statute.
no, just a.
How wide is it?
I forget. We went over this exact layout with Chief McGuire, and even the access through here because he wanted to make sure that you could bring a ladder truck in here and place it down and have enough support under here, so it's not on the grass or whatever else. So we looked at this design.
So that's all open?
This is all open. Yes, this is open and this is open. So he had access to these buildings. Yeah, he reviewed this plan.
Because there's no way if that was blocked, that you'd be able to get a truck.
No, we absolutely.
Okay, anybody else? I'm tired, folks.
I'm just curious about one thing. Why is LEED more popular? Whenever this legislation has specified LEED instead of NGBS.
It's out soon.
Just,
LEED spends a lot more money on lobbying.
Oh, okay. That's it.
To be very blunt about it, it's the truth. As a lobbyist.
I wasn't happy with LEED when it found out that you get a point for just hiring a lead architect. That was very-
He's not.
I know you're not, but I just, that's really just, nice job. Nice.
You're the board.
Okay,
I
can I
will
have a
tell
motion
you-
to adjourn?
You just gave.
So moved. Now
Okay, now we're just talking.
talking.
I will tell you
We're done.
Yeah.
that
Would you
the,
like this?
Give it to Dave.
Yeah. Would you want it?
that the growth of NGBS, if you